Recording.
All right, go ahead, Dick.
I'd like to call this joint meeting of the Finance and Executive Committee to order. First thing on the agenda is the roll call.
Dick Pufall. Dick.
Say you're here, Dick.
What?
Say you're here. She called your name for roll call.
Dick.
Can we get a roll call, Lori?
She's asking you to say yes if you're here.
I can't hear
Dick
that.
Puf-
Yes,
Dick
I'm here. Of
Pufall.
course I'm here.
Mike Berlin.
Here.
Gary Mertig.
Here.
If
Bill
she knows he
Metzinger.
shouldn't have the volume.
Here.
Martin Vitek.
Here.
Laura Negro.
Here.
Pat Kinney.
Here.
Ron Stendor.
Here.
That's everyone.
No, it's not good.
Hang on for 1 second. The sound is supposed to be coming from the TV set.
It did before. Modern marvels.
Laura, can you give me a sound check?
I can hear you.
Yeah. I want you to just count up to 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
And hang on here, we got speaker. Do it again.
1, 2, 3.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep, thank you. We appreciate that. That was just something on the computer here. We just had to switch over.
Okay, the second thing on the agenda is the approval of the agenda of the executive meeting from December 8th, motion to approve.
Also move, this is Gary.
Do we have a second?
Wait a minute. We have approval of agenda.
That's what we're voting on.
Yeah, I'll make-
Yeah, well, Dick had the minutes in there.
Okay, but I'll make a
Oh,
motion.
I'm sorry. Yeah, motion to approve the agenda.
Also move Supervisor Murdick.
Thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. Number 3, public comment period. Being no public here, we'll go to number 4 now. Approval.
Is there
of the
anybody
meeting.
online?
What?
Is there anybody online for public comment?
Is there anybody what?
Online for public
Online?
comment.
Mine has public comment.
I have no one.
There is one
Thank you,
online.
Lori.
So this is Stephen.
Go ahead.
We are just online for the proposal that's on your agenda. We're not here to make public comment. Unless this would be the appropriate time to speak.
I'm sorry, I did not catch your name.
Okay, this is, I'm Mike Konechny and Steve Corbell, and we have a proposal item number 6 on your agenda. And we're just here to answer questions or if they want input on our company. So we don't plan on speaking during public comment.
Yeah, you'll just wait for item number 6.
Okay.
Anyone else on the phone want to comment?
Go ahead, Dick.
Does that hang up when they're done?
Yep, we're good.
And nobody else on the phone want to comment? Okay, we'll move along then. Approval of the meeting minutes from December 8th of the Executive Committee. Yeah,
So
need a
so in this
motion.
case, we would just have the executive committee make motion and second and vote, and then the reciprocal would happen on finance committee. So just ask for the executive committee members to make a motion.
Okay, this is Bill. I make a motion that we adopt them.
Okay.
Just adopt the executive committee.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, Supervisor Murdick will second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the executive committee meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Laura, gonna do the finance?
You can just run it while you're doing it. Just ask for a motion and a second for
Need a
finance.
motion to approve the finance committee meeting minutes from December 17th.
This is Laura Negro. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Laura. Marty
I did.
seconded it. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Discussion action, payment of invoices, due date limit.
Okay, as you can see, we've had, we're having a joint meeting because a lot of these items, both these committees need to weigh in on and need to be aware of. If we have an action item that needs a vote that is outside of the county board purview, we would just ask a committee to vote on it. So going forward from here, the payment of invoices is, we're going to take the county board financial consultant proposal. I would just ask that the finance committee vote and weigh in on the financial consultant's proposal. Cash flow concerns are basically not basically just for both committees, December financials for both committees. Referendum for county board or for both committees. There's just the action on there is just giving direction to the county board chairman as he develops the agenda for the county board meeting. Number of court commissioners, item number 10, will be that needs to go to county board. So county board will approve that. Insurance review is there is possible action, but it's mostly just information. If there is possible action, we would, because there's overlap, the executive committee for this county acts as the personnel committee, which would basically deal with personnel issues, the employee handbook. Finance committee obviously deals with the finance. This is an overlapping issue. We'll see if there's an action item, which committee, is it a personnel issue or a financial decision? So I just wanted everybody to kind of be aware of that going forward. So with that, I'll go into, let's see, item number 5. Got to pull that up. This came about because we ended up with a bill from a law firm that we thought we had closed the books out. And we ended up with a bill about $40,000 that came, I don't know, third week in January for services that were rendered for the entire year of 2020 and for some months in 2019. Obviously, from a cash flow perspective, we need to have, better management of our bills. We can't have people just saving up, 14, 15 months of bills. And so we wanted to come up with a policy. And so the policy that I had proposed, which is, one would be on the court orders. And so, because a lot of this might deal with the orders, and you're dealing with guardian ad litems, you're dealing with indigent lawyer fees, you're dealing with adversarial counsels. So these are different things that the judge appoints lawyers to represent county interests. And so within here, I basically had said bills must be submitted on a monthly basis. All bills are due January 31st for services provided the previous year. Bills that are older than 90 days will not be paid if prior arrangements for late invoicing is not made prior to day 75. If a case is ongoing at the end of the year, interim billing must be submitted no later than January 31st. Late bills will not be paid. In conversation with the judge, he basically feels that there might be some pushback from the bar on this issue because, the law firms in the county do not have to take these cases. They basically agree to take cases on behalf of the county. I talked to corp counsel for Ashland County, and he reached out to his fellow bar members, and I'm not talking the bar members at the office bar, the Safari bar, I'm talking the lawyer bar. And he said, could we meet in the middle and require some sort of quarterly billing if any attorney's fees that are to be paid by the county are over $1,000 in any given quarter? If fees are under $1,000, the case is ongoing, no invoice would be required. And so I guess I don't have any problem. I don't have a problem with that particular amendment to this particular recommendation. And so I guess I would seek a motion to say, and I believe we're going to go to county board with this because we're going to be setting a county-wide policy. So this will not just affect the court systems. This will also affect any other types of contractors we have, plumbers, any types of services that we have. And I would want the full county board to weigh in on that. I would seek a motion to say that all bills need to go to the county if they're over $1,000 in any one quarter, and any bills, and all bills for the previous year need to be submitted to the county by January 31st. That would be my motion.
Do we have a motion to that effect? Motion made by Mike Berlin. Do we have a
This is Laura
second?
Negro, I'll second it. I'll second that. If nobody else did.
Seconded by, yes.
And I'll let the administrator ponder this for the agenda bill that goes to the full board. So one question in my mind when I read this is, how do you determine the start date? So the judge may make a decision on a particular date, but how does the county know when an attorney was actually engaged, one that was willing to take it? But it could be a plumber too. You call on something and, Friday of one week, it might be Wednesday of the next week before the plumber says, yeah, I'll do that work. So you may have to have some way of determining an actual start date to doing this counting. I'll let you ponder that outside the meeting. And the other thing would be, when you said any bills by the end of January, what's not clear to me there is if the work has been completed or not in that language. And so I would suggest adding any bills, whether full or partial, by the end of January. So someone doesn't say, well, I'm still in the middle of providing the service, I don't have my bill ready yet. If you'd want the bill as for whatever work has been done by the end of the year, even if there's more work to do.
Yes, well, yeah, what we're trying to stop is somebody coming in March and saying, here's bills for services that happened last year, or in this one case, here's bills that happened from 2019 and we got them just a couple weeks ago.
Right, so that part about any bills due by the end of January, I would suggest adding for any services or work, whether the work has been completed or not, any billing through the end of December. Because if they're still in progress and thinking, well, I haven't submitted my bill because I'm not done, then they might argue,
Well, I think we need to, I think it's pretty clear. You need to submit any bills for the previous year by January 31st. I think that's clear enough for me.
It's not clear enough to me, because I might say, let's say it's a plumbing job, I've got parts, I've got subcontractors, something pretty involved. I don't actually write that bill typically until I'm done. But if you want a bill for work and services provided through the end of December, that's different than a bill for waiting until everything's done. So we may have different interpretations of how that works. So I just would suggest adding whether for all services.
So you would like to add to that motion that interim billings for previous year services would be required by January 31st.
Right, because I think that's what you're looking for, if I'm understanding you.
Yes.
But it's, as originally stated, it wasn't clear to me if a work in progress, if you were looking for that, you are. So I would just make it clear that you're looking for any billing for anything, whether.
It's a matter of interpretation. I think saying all bills have to be in by January 31st is clear enough to me, but if the committee wants to have a clarification saying interim bills also have to be submitted by January 31st, we could see if the people who made the motion would take that as a friendly amendment.
Can we have more discussion on this before we decide? My question is we've got two things that are going back and forth here, and I very much agree with what Pat said. We've got that bills older than 90 days will not be paid unless there's prior arrangements, and then we've got the stuff for last year must be submitted no later than January 31st. So are we giving the December people enough time? Or, you know, I do like Max's idea about quarterly billing, because, or sending in quarterly receipts, or however that is, because at least every quarter we know that these things will be sent in to us. We know when there's a date, instead of constant rolling from whenever their case starts to whenever it finishes. If we have this rolling 30 days, it would seem to make more chaos in our books than if it was quarterly, they had to make sure they got something in. So two things there, the quarterly thing, and then the 90 days kind of clashing up against January 31st, because if they start in December, they've got 90 days.
So I believe the motion was made, which is that bills have to be submitted to the county on a quarterly basis, and all bills need to be submitted by January 31st for the previous year's work. And then the friendly amendment, which we're considering, is we would add in there, in addition, interim bills for work done the previous year also have to be submitted by January 31st.
Okay, well, the stuff written says monthly basis. And then there's 90 days, and
Yeah,
then
so this
there's
is
the 31st, so.
Yeah, in order to facilitate packets being out a week ahead of time, we didn't have feedback from the judge on this, so we're basically moving away from the language that was in your packet, and we're coming up with new language.
Okay.
So I'm supportive of doing it quarterly, but to Laura's point, if the stuff at the end of the year is due by the end of January, it seems like there's two due dates then. If we happen to be billed through the end of December, on the one hand, you're asking for them by the end of January. On the other hand, you're suggesting quarterly. So would you, if we're going to go with quarterly, would you change the end of January to the end of the first quarter?
No.
And how would a person determine which they're supposed to follow if they have bills due in late December?
Sue, what is our general cutoff for bills being paid for 2020?
Would be February 28th, the end of February.
Okay.
And I think that Human Services is going to have a real issue with January 31st as a cutoff for billing season. The end of their fiscal year, or the end that they have to have their stuff in the state, is February 28th. So, and we use that date. So I think January 31st, in my opinion, is too soon. I know that there was the big issue with the one attorney that kind of prompted this whole thing, but we do have quite a few bills and statements that come in February as well.
So the recommendation of the clerk's office would be to switch it to February 28th.
Yes.
Not, okay. And then, you know, to Pat's point concerning the quarterly billing, we could, I guess, we're not going to go out to March 31st on this. We can't do that. And so because we're not going to go to March 31st, you could, then you'd have to say during the year, quarterly billings would be required, and all previous year's payment invoices have to be in by February 28th.
Who's going to be responsible for monitoring that these attorneys are quarterly, sending in quarterly statements?
It would be the clerk's office.
Hey, get your bill in.
The clerk of court's office is one that is managing this, because they're the ones that basically have not had the availability or a policy to say, turn in bills anytime you want. Right now, they could turn in bills a year or 2 years late, and we have no policy. So we need to develop a policy to make sure that they have something to enforce. There's somebody on the line. If you're not talking, please mute. Thank you.
Well, I get where Clark wants to, because best practice that.
This is
Lori,
because
can you mute Nick?
Because this is going to go to county board, the county board will be the ultimate purveyor in the approval of the policy. I don't think a policy would be challenged in this case if it was just a general vote, but because it's a fiscal policy, you know, if you want to have an individual committee vote on it, fiscal policy would probably go through the finance committee, but it doesn't make an awful lot of difference to me since ultimately the county board is the one signing off on this. Either committee or joint committee be fine for me.
Okay, now where are we at? This confusing little issue.
All right. Lori, did you write down the motion? You're muted, Lori. Lori. All right, our note taker is not available. So, what?
Well, you mentioned February 28th as this leap year. Would you prefer, from your perspective, February 28th or the end of February as the language?
End of February.
Okay. All right, so we're just going to draft it up here then. So we will require quarterly billings for bills that are over $1,000. Marty, you had your hand up.
I had a question, and I don't know if this, but anyway.
If he could speak up, I can't hear him.
Bring your mic a little closer there, thank you.
Okay, if we have a contract with somebody to build a chicken coop someplace, and they have, and the contract specified the payments, how they'll be paid, would this motion affect that?
So this would be a general policy. So let's say the county wants to come in and build a new government center. I would think within the contract that the county board would sign, there would be an exemption to the general invoicing policy. So I would think anything that we're having, and so if you have a contract that stipulates, you got a 6 month, you're going to build let's say you're going to redo a road all the way down to the base, and it's going to take you 6 months to do it. We're going to write a contract for that. And if that contract is in conflict with this policy, it would be in the contract. Yes, Sue.
Basically, the only thing that brought up this issue was the attorney.
Yep.
So why can't you make the policy for Crooked Court instead of, why muck up everything else that has worked okay?
Well, because you develop policies in order to stop bad things from happening. If you don't have a policy, you could have something that comes back a year later and says for a non-court related thing and sends us an invoice. Right now, you have nothing that says you can't do that. The question is it in the county's interest to preventatively do something before it happens?
But let's say someone sends a statement to us in March for a couple of computers that we purchased in December. Are you going to deny that bill then? Or are you going to just pay it out of the 2021 then? You're liable for the bill.
Yeah. Well,
it's just more or less stating if we can charge it back to the prior year or pay it in the current year.
The question is, do you want to set a timeline? If somebody submits a bill in June for an invoice for a computer that came in December, is that acceptable?
Right.
If that's not acceptable, you need to set a policy that says what is acceptable.
Right. We have been doing that in February, so.
And if that's your suggestion, is we basically go to end of February, then I think that's an acceptable policy. It doesn't matter to me when it is. I'm just saying we need to have a policy, because if we don't have a policy, somebody could come back 6 months, 8 months, 14 months later and submit a bill. So we do need a policy.
What did Max say about that?
Max basically suggested that we basically, he said if there's quarterly billings for anything that's over $1,000 for attorneys, when he talked to the bar in his association. And so he feels it's totally unacceptable not to have a policy. He says we should have a policy so people can't come back to us a year or two later and bill us for services. So he's recommending that we adopt a policy.
Okay.
And so what we're just debating here is what should the policy be that we want to present to the county board. And we had a motion on we had a motion that started with quarterly billings for $1,000, and anything for previous years needs to be done by January 31st. We have since had discussion to modify that to have end of year, previous year billings need to be in by the end of February for the previous year. And we still have the language that we talked about, $1,000 in any quarter.
So we haven't voted on this with the new amendment?
We're
Yes.
still in discussion.
Well, that's where we're trying to get to. So, Laura, did you write down? Laura, are you on there and write that down?
I am here. I'm here.
Did you write down that motion?
Yes. It was
Okay.
your original recommended motion.
Okay. And then we're basically amending that if the people are for friendly amendments to say end of February for previous year billings instead of January.
Okay.
Did we have any other friendly amendments to that? I can't remember.
Can we tack on, these due dates are not applicable if there is a contract in effect? Because like you said, contracts would be outside of that, but if we don't state it in this, we could tangle up a bunch of people.
I don't have a problem with that. We could say the policy is exempt if it's exempted by a contract. Okay. Any other before we summarize this? Any other comments on this?
No, I gotta ask, when the attorneys are hired by it because of the judge requires an attorney, is that a contract?
So what will happen on the attorneys is there's the court order. So the language actually, we just started, the reason this came up is, because of that one bill, and then the judge started just putting on the bottom that annual bills are required. And then when I'm looking at our cash management issue, which we'll be discussing later, to me, annual bills are not enough for me to manage the county. And so that's why I'm in conversations with the clerk of court staff, the judge, our attorney, and our fiscal staff to come up with a better policy than saying you just have to submit one bill a year. And, I wouldn't say it's a contract, it's an order. You're going to do this job. And he's ordering, so the judge is actually ordering the county to pay this bill, is what's happening.
So when the county engages an attorney, is there a contract?
I don't think so.
I think so. I'm going to suggest that you talk to Sue and court counsel more about this before the board meeting. I'm supportive of the policy. So if we're going to put terms in like contract, road construction, that's one thing, which I think is the intent there. But then the question is what constitutes a contract? We may be defeating the purpose of what Laura was trying to get at. And
well, he would include that language in the order itself. So he would, whatever the judge, whatever we approve, the judge would just put on the order itself. So he would follow the policy. And by state statute, he has to follow any county payment policy.
So what's gnawing at me is two things. One of which is I'm not sure how this is going to impact staff time. It's partly questions if everybody's saying, when does this do, when does this do, and then giving you multiple things instead of one would have been working okay for you in the past. It may take more staff time, but then I'm also concerned about a precedent. If on the one hand, you give one party more time and then somebody else you say no to, from a legal perspective, and this is a court counsel question, if you give one party more time than want somebody else, is there a precedent there that then becomes a headache? Which is a whole other question that you could ask court counsel outside of the meeting. So whatever you develop, I think, has to be legally enforceable too, and then not add to staff burden, but yet get at the issue.
But still fix the issue, which is annual billing and 15-month-old bills are unacceptable for the county. Totally unacceptable. So Lori, can you read back the motion that we had?
Hold on for 1 second. I was delivering a message to the custodian to lower the flag.
Why are we lowering the flag?
In remembrance of all of those that lost their lives due to COVID.
Okay.
That all bills to the county, if they are over $1,000, they need to be billed quarterly. Previously year end need to be in by February 28th or the previous year's billing, of the previous year's billing, unless exempted by a contract.
Didn't we change that to end of February?
Instead of 2/28. That is the end of February.
Well, I know, but
Unless
it's
it's
a
leap
leap
year.
year thing. Yep.
Okay, I can change that.
All right, now what?
So because we changed it, I want you to ask the people that made the original motion if they agree to these friendly amendments.
Motion stands.
Who seconded that? Laura?
Is it-
You
Yeah,
accept the friendly
Yes.
amendment?
yes.
Okay. So we'll vote on the payment of late bills
Point,
with the friendly amendment. Yes, here.
point of clarification. Mike, did you say motion stands? Your original motion?
I vote with the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, he voted to the
Okay.
bill.
So
Well,
which committee are you asking to vote on this?
Finance.
Finance.
So the minutes reflect this in the finance.
this is like being in the middle of a three-ring circus right now.
There you go, and you're the leader.
All right, we have the motion on the table with the friendly amendment, which is just read by Lori. All those in favor of that amendment and that motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It's not thoroughly confused. Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, so this issue, the next agenda item is looking at engaging a financial consultant to help with county reporting systems, internal controls, processing, budgeting, and other fiscal concerns. As you can see with your audit reports that have come over the last, whatever, how many years you want to go back, they continually recommend that the county hire a financial director for the county. And the county has not taken that step. They've hired an administrator that is not a fiscal director. And because of this and some of my concerns concerning our short-term cash flow issues, which will be on discussion on the coming up agenda item number 7, actually, I searched out 2 consultants that would come in and work with the county staff to help us get better, timely reportings that are meaningful, not only for staff and the department heads, but also for the county board and for the citizens. One of the goals for me is to have our monthly reports in a condensed version in front of, on our website every month, so the citizens can see exactly where we're at on every department per our adopted budget. We don't have the staff time to do that right now. And if we want that done, we're going to have to pay somebody to help us develop the automation needed to be able to produce that, and also to provide us with a cash flow analysis. In my discussions with the auditors, they have real concerns that we are going to run out of cash at some point during this year. And they also have concerns for our long-term viability with this particular issue. I think we need to hire somebody that has greater fiscal management abilities than myself. And with that, I have two proposals. The first proposal in your packet is from Ellers. And Ellers is a public management outfit that does everything from pro formas for sewer and water, major infrastructure projects. They do public financing for large buildings and bondings. They issue bonds for roads and other types of public improvements. I've used them as a city administrator when I was a city administrator for a town over by St. Paul for developing proposals for large $20–30 million infrastructure projects. So within their scope of services, they basically put together a 3-year cash flow projection that would flow a month-by-month basis, clearly identify where we might have cash shortfalls. And then after immediate cash needs, we propose a 10-year fiscal management plan that will develop consensus for the county board around long-term strategies to fund county government. Cash flow projections and fiscal management we completed simultaneously. The cash flow projections will take 2 to 3 weeks. The financial management plan will take about 3 months. So I won't read through the rest of the packet. For them, their bottom line is they basically would do the cash flow projections for $2,500 and the fiscal management plan at $23,000. The fiscal management plan, we build hourly at a rate of $255 for actual hours worked. So it could be more, it could be less. But they basically would meet with department head staff, meet with fiscal department over in the county clerk's office and myself, and start developing this, and then engage the county board so the county board has buy-in concerning what is our long-term ability to fund county operations. The second proposal is from MWK LLC, and this company is involved. They basically have 2 individuals. Their resumes are attached. One was a county administrator, financial director, a city financial director. Another one was a CPA and other operations. Their scope of services is attached here. So again, analyze current fiscal conditions, cash flows to the county, determine reason for the present conditions, and propose one-time transfers to eliminate accumulated fund deficits if possible. And then evaluate the current procedures used to prepare annual budgets and suggest changes to improve fiscal management, provide assistance to county personnel to review and use Springbrook financial reports to assist in the management of the county, review details of the fiscal system procedures, meet with county department heads, fiscal personnel, and I won't finish reading that, but you can see the rest of that. So I guess for the finance committee, the first question is, do you think that it would be a benefit to engage a consultant to help with fiscal reporting and oversight for the county? We would have to take money out of the contingency fund, which would take a vote of the county board per your handbook. And if you do decide that you think this would be beneficial to the county, then we have to decide who would we want to engage in, or do we want to go farther afield and look for other types of contractors that would provide this type of service. So with that, I'll take questions.
I have a question for you.
What?
If the financial status is dire straits, how are we going to fund this?
We're going to fund the fee from the contingency fund for these individuals. And that takes a vote of the county board.
I didn't realize we had money stashed away anywhere. Yes, Laura.
I didn't know we were doing RFPs. I already let Clark know that I have somebody that is a professor down in UW Stevens Point who just has been, I don't have his resume in front of me, but he has done all the same things that each one of these companies and people have on their resume. He's been slowly going through some information that I sent him, and he would be willing to help us for nothing. I would have had him write up a proposal if I'd have known that we were going to have proposals pitched.
Yes, Bill.
You never gave us the price on the second one.
Oh, the second one was,
125 an hour, isn't it? Or something?
Yeah.
Plus travel and other expenses.
yeah. Where is that here? Yeah, 125 an hour. With the expected fees of around 16 to 18,000. And like I say, if Laura has somebody that can do this for free and do the same job, there wouldn't be any need to spend money. But that'd be a committee decision. Or we postpone the decision and see if you want to have, go farther afield. This is basically what I collected from my fellow county administrators and people that they've used in the past.
Hey, Dick.
No, it's behind me. How am I going to see? Yes.
Well, the first question of should we consider hiring someone, I will support that strongly. In 2013, when I was on the Aspen City Council, the city had some financial challenges. The city had more cash at the moment, but I think had more debt compared to the county. And what the financial plan did was to give the city a roadmap going forward on where it was at, setting priorities, including how we budget towards those, et cetera. And the new fire station that the city built opened in, I think, 2016, if I remember. Without that financial plan, the city would have never built that fire station at that point. The city had been kicking building a fire station down the road for years, but the city did not have a financial plan. Once they had a sound financial plan, they were really able to plan everything else around that. And where the county is at right now, one of the things that's incredibly clear to me is the county does not have really a financial plan at all. We're trying to pay bills. We're trying to get through one thing at a time. And there's, as far as I can tell, we don't have anything to guide us as we make those decisions. And those decisions are tied around what are our priorities. We have work to do on setting those. And then we have to plan around those financially. And that would include debt service, along with the general levy and the debt levy to address those things. So I think we do need a plan. And my feeling is we need to hire someone or a firm where we have a high degree of confidence that they can develop a plan that we can actually follow with a high degree of confidence, because without a sound plan, we could end up in worse shape than we are.
Dick.
Yes.
Yeah, Supervisor Murdick. I'm going to speak as a county board member here because I think this is the Finance Committee's recommendation to the full board of what we do, but we do need monthly reports. I can't believe that we don't have each department have a monthly report showing where they are for the month of January, February, March, throughout the year, because this unknown of just spending money and then later on finding out that, hey, well, you overspent our budget or we're going to steal money basically from another department, has got to stop. So I'm comfortable with having the Finance Committee make this decision because that's where it belongs and bring it to the full county board. But I think we need to do something soon. We need to have budgets that make sense where we are each month so the county board can look at it, the departments can look at it and say, hey, our budget is this much money and we're spending at a rate and we know what our future spending is going to be. We're in trouble somewhere. We need to know in early part of the year, so we don't get to the end of December and have somebody come to the board, because I feel the county board's been in the dark on the budgets, and we need to know that. And I think the only way we know it is if the departments know it. So I'm fully in favor of having finance make a decision and bring it to the county board, and let's get this started somewhere, because we just can't keep spending money that we don't even know we have or don't have, and the departments need to know that too.
Okay.
Laura has her hand up, Dick.
Oh, Laura.
I totally agree with Gary on that. I don't know about monthly, but at least quarterly updates going to the full board, possibly monthly with updates going to finance. But we need to look at efficiencies and see if we have outdated practices. We also need to have as close to a unified system as what we can get, and possibly it could be, some of this could be as simple as some technology. There's lots of different places we can look. I think we need to open this up, not just look at two people. And like I said, I have somebody in, I can't get his resume to open now. So I went from one problem to another. But his resume is very similar to the second group's, is it Michael's resume? Except he was the finance director for the city of Stevens Point. He's actually the one that is teaching people on UWSP campus how to do all the government financing and building budgets. He's the one that got me a connection to explain a bunch of our issues with our health plan. He is very knowledgeable, and he has offered this to me because he's the one that showed me how to do budgets. And while I'm not as familiar with where the grant breakdown is, he is more familiar with those that some positions, I mean, we can start cutting positions all we want, but if we're cutting a position and only $20,000 of this position is our funding, it really doesn't save us anything. It just cuts off some of the grants from the state. So there's lots of bits and pieces that have to be handled with that. And he is going to write up a proposal also. Like I said, if I'd have known that we were going to have these pitched in this and earlier than the week ahead of time, he could have had something, but he's working on something now. But we can't just keep letting it go. There's not been enough updates from committees to the county board, I don't feel, because I think even though we're run by committees and the decisions are done there, I think when we have committee updates, there should actually be updates from each committee that met the previous month or months. It keeps us as a whole more involved and more aware of what things are going on. And I think a lot of this is just county board not asking for the information and actually not demanding the information. And the buck falls on us.
So are you making a motion, Laura? It's nice to hear you talk, but we're here to make motions and make decisions.
I make the motion that we, let's see, that we ask for proposals for a financial consultant to help project and produce fiscal information for our county board, and that to be an immediate move.
I don't have any idea what that motion was. It sounded like he's talking in the tunnel. I can't hear that very good.
Okay, Laura made a motion that basically stipulates that she wants to go out and have further RFPs and have more proposals for consideration.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you have a second on that motion?
So far, there has not been. You have to ask for one.
Pardon me?
You should ask for a second.
I just did.
Okay.
We have a motion, a second on that motion.
I'll second that motion.
All right, motion is seconded by Mike Berlin.
Okay. So my understanding of the motion before there's a vote is that if this motion were to pass, we would not be considering either of the firms that are in the packet today. Is that correct? And if
You would not be they would be in consideration if we find other parties that want to submit proposals. So this will take us another, whatever, month or two or something like that to come back to get proposals.
So I want to ask the administrator, from your perspective, would a delay of a month affect the accounting in any meaningful way? And how hard have you looked for proposals? You've got two. Do you think there are more firms out there?
I'm sure there are more firms out there. I work with WCA, asked for recommendations from the Wisconsin Accountants Association, and then I asked for recommendations from the 10 area county administrators that are part of our Northwestern Wisconsin Club. And so that's what I did. But I didn't put an advertisement out. I didn't, I wasn't going to, not that the Ashland paper is going to get anybody to respond to it, but I'm sure there's listservs. I'm part of the financial listserv directory for this state. I could certainly put a request out there to find out what other people down in Janesville and Oconomowoc have done to find out what they've utilized. We could certainly cast a broader net if that would be the consensus of the committee.
So what about a delay of a month? What are your thoughts on that?
It might be more than a month, but I guess for me, when I'm looking at the cash, I have concerns for cash in December. I think that's where I think we may not have cash, and we may have to go to, as in discussion, the next agenda item, we're going to ask for flexibility from these committees to help us if we need cash. So, I mean, it's not, it's taken you 10 years to get to this point. Another month or two is not going to make any difference to the county overall, in my mind. It just makes, if you make, so I'm not opposed to this motion. If we, I'll try to, when I have time, I'll try to find some more people and come back. These two parties will still be part of that mix. And then we'll come back with if there's any other proposals. If it's approved by and I'm assuming that this would be a finance committee vote, not an executive committee vote. But it's good to have both you here because these are serious issues for the county. Dick, Marty has a question.
Yes, Marty.
We have two proposals on the table. We have a pretty good idea of what this is going to cost, ballpark wise. So I'm wondering, what is there to be gained by expanding?
I can't hear anything he says.
Oh,
Bring that mic right up to your mouth there.
okay. I'm wondering, did you hear the first part, Laura?
No, I could hear you saying something.
Okay, what I was saying is that with these two proposals, we have a kind of a ballpark idea of what this is going to cost. And I'm wondering what's to be gained by expanding it.
Well, my thought is at least the guy that wants to do it for free because he's a friend of mine and I know the knowledge that he's got and he doesn't have to have it. I'm just saying that he can get a proposal in also. If I'd have known, I would have had that happen. But also, as a county, shouldn't we put out RFPs for any kind of contracts that we're looking to have? To give, I mean, do we just pick a couple out of a hat? And not that I'm saying these guys aren't qualified at all, but, you know, we just got done talking about a billing process. Shouldn't we have a process overall that's for putting out RFPs for any of the work that we're doing? We have really inconsistent policies with lots of things.
Yeah.
Well, I think Laura asked a good question, and I guess I would like an answer to it from the administrator who ponders that. When I look at developing a financial plan, I'm going to use a parallel here, and I think it's a fair one. If someone wants to go into business or is running a business, you could hire all sorts of people to write a business plan for you. And I've seen some really lousy business plans, and that costs people a lot of time and money. One of the firms here is someone I have familiarity with, including the person who signed the letter for my time on the city council. And that firm has done extraordinarily well by the city. I spoke with the previous administrator to see what his take was. His take was the same. I have two concerns about who the county would hire if the county chooses to hire someone. One of which is, I really think a firm that does this full time, has experienced staff, and does this professionally. And I'm not saying that none of the firms wouldn't be professional, but you know, some firms are doing this full time and lots of staff, and this is routine for them, so to speak. And you know what you're getting. And then there's going to be people that might have an interest that we have no idea what they really have to offer. And while they might be cheaper or do it for free, we don't know what we're getting. And so there's a risk with hiring too, you know. And so sometimes, I guess I'm playing it safe, is that you want to make darn sure that you have a high degree of confidence in something like this. If we're talking about the fiscal health of this county going forward, you know, for 5 or 10 years forward. And I think it's important to get started, and I think it's really important to hire either a person or a firm that we know we have a high degree of confidence in. And personally, I'm not interested in hiring either an individual or someone that does something else full time, because I'm weighing the risk and reward. I know what one of these firms offers, and it's been a good experience for the city. It's made all the difference in my mind for them, and the previous administrator speaks highly of that experience too. And I know that they've been extremely responsive once they were engaged to do that work. And I think all of those things matter. It's not just that initial plan, but to be able to work with the county going forward to engage in the issues that arise as we do things. And it's also important that they understand tax laws, the politics, understanding debt service extremely well, and then laying out a plan to fit all these pieces together. And that's a pretty serious undertaking if it's actually going to be followed. And there is a firm in here who was very successful on doing that with the city. And so my personal preferences, and I understand what Laura's saying, and I understand the sentiments and the desire, but I think we should get started and we should hire a firm that does this, full time, and it's really what they do. And I think one of the firms in here, the administrator mentioned he has an experience with them, and my sense is they do probably more work in this area than any other firm in the state. That would be my understanding.
Yeah, so to answer your one question that Laura brought up concerning the purchasing policy, down in my office, there's a little whiteboard of all the policies that the county needs. And I've been slowly ticking those off as we go through. We just got completed with the 100 pages of record retention policy, but purchasing policies on that board, social media policies on that board. There's a couple other, so these are just things that, you guys have not had good policies. Now we're developing a policy on late payments, and so all these things just take time to work through. And you are right, we don't have a good clear-cut county-wide purchasing policy. So
I guess my point with the motion is it doesn't hurt to throw an RFP out there and see what we get. It doesn't preclude anybody that's the two firms that have their stuff in. But it's just good business. I'll call the question.
Why don't we have one more set?
Well, I want to ask the administrator this, because this is related to financial plan. You said a month wouldn't really matter, but if we're going to set priorities related to the budget, if we're going to have to trim something, which is a real possibility, part of the reason that we're having a joint
Order, I called the question.
He had his hand up before you did that, Laura.
Okay.
is if we're going to have to set priorities with the budget, if there's going to have to be some cutting, what process are we going to go through to get there? So we've got committees, we've got executive committee, we've got a finance board that have to prove things. If we're going to go through this process in as thoughtful a way as we get to the by the end of the year, my concern with delays, and throw this out again to the administrator in particular, if we take another month to hire someone, then what does that impact on saying, let's say there's a particular department with a large budget, we say, look, we've got to cut your budget by X%, which we may have to do. Then we go through a process of saying, okay, how does that impact services that the county provides? What committees does that have to go through for consideration so we understand those impacts, and so we get to the board and develop a budget at the end of the year. I think the more time we have to work through this before a budget's approved in November, the better. And I've got a feeling this is going to take a while. And I'm saying that in part based on past experience. Because if we end up rushed and say, look, we're just going to make these cuts, we're not as thoughtful as if we have more time to go through setting priorities and working our way through that process. I see some risk in that delay too.
So let me speak to that. Referendum is going to be happening on April 6th. There's going to be a possible infusion of general levy money of $938,000. If that doesn't happen, the county's going to have to be changing an awful lot of things, as you alluded to. So it would be my goal to basically have somebody either ready to go or on contract by that date. Because if we're going to get $900,000, we're going to provide a little more cushion for a 5-year period, which is what the referendum is about. That doesn't mean that we don't need to do this planning. We definitely need to do the planning. We definitely need to do this reporting. We definitely need to do that. But from an immediate cash perspective, we would be sitting better off to methodically go through that. If that doesn't happen, if the referendum is voted down on April 6th, then yeah, we're going to need some help to do that. So I would like to have somebody lined up so then April we can know where we're going. Are we going with these more longer range plans because the county is in a better fiscal position, or are we more in a short-term emergency plan, which is okay, the 2022 budget's going to be coming up and we need help trying to figure out what to do on these individual funds to try to balance them out to make sure we're not continually losing and borrowing money, which is what you've seen over the past 10 years. So, I mean, I'm not opposed to waiting another month. It's not, I don't think it's going to make an awful lot of difference. And I think it might provide better clarity when the financial company knows, did the referendum pass or did the referendum not pass?
I have one more thing before I finish my call to question, if I can.
Yes,
Is that okay? The board has been really good at putting out fires. I don't think we need to rush through anything. A month and a half to get this through isn't a big deal, but we have to stop putting out fires and we need to start making longer term plans. And when it comes down to those pieces that Clark says he's got on the whiteboard with the policies too, we need to start ticking those off. That needs to be a board priority too. I don't know if that needs to originate from the exec committee, if that's where they want to take it off, but we need to start having direction on what committees should be doing what. I mean, these issues are being, as Clark is finding them and bringing them to us, I mean, we can wait for that stuff or we can try to prep for this. That's part of our job too, is to sit down with him and set out some good, strong priorities. And I, like I said, I get the urgent need for this, but we are always on the back end of this stuff instead of on the front end of it. Let's put a little bit of planning into this, put an RFP out, go through our motions like we should and do our due diligence, and then go into this headlong knowing that there's some uncomfortable decisions that all of us are going to have to make. And now I'd like to call the question if I can.
All right, Laura, I guess I haven't had much of a chance to with everything that's going on in here, but I would like to make a comment before we vote on your motion.
Okay, I'll hold it again.
Pat Kinney had spoke about the Ellers and Associates in the, I guess all of the, in more than one time that we had used those through the city of Aspen. To my knowledge, we've never ever had a problem with them. It's a well-established, very capable firm. It's a known quantity, and we, I don't know if you want to take a shot in the dark with a company you've never worked with, or if you want to go with an established firm. In my estimation, of course, this is just my estimation. I think that we should go with Ellers and Associates because of the track record that they've had with the city of Aspen many, many times. And with that, we will, Laura has a motion on the table to call the question. Do we have to vote on calling the question?
Yeah, normally, I can't remember. Normally, don't you vote on calling a question?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So I ask for a vote for calling the question.
All right, all in favor of calling the question, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Now we have to vote on the financial consultant proposal that Laura has put forth to expand the RFP. Do you want Laura to read the
Laura's motion that she was calling the question on is that she would like to delay this decision and put out an RFP and come back at a later date with more proposals. That's her question that she's calling. That's the question we're voting on right now.
Okay, did everybody get that? All those in favor of Laura's proposal signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Aye. People have no comment?
It's just finance that's voting on this, correct?
Yeah, we should probably do a roll call on that, Lori, just because it's hard to hear that. So Lori, if you could call the finance committee roll on this question.
Okay, Laura Negro,
Aye.
Pat Kinney,
No.
Ron Stendor. I think he left the meeting. Mike Berlin,
Yes.
Marty
No,
Vitek.
No.
So you have a tie
How do we have a tie?
because Ron left the meeting.
Oh, okay, then Dick votes for it if in the tie.
And, no.
Okay, so Dick voted no, so that motion did not carry.
Okay, then I'd like to make a motion that Ellers be, if we're gonna go ahead and do this, that we go with Ellers. Because I agree with the other ones that it's got the staff and the time and everything to do this.
This is Pat, I'll second the motion.
The motion was to,
Sue, you got a
Can I
question?
comment? I'm not familiar with Ellers, but I do know Steve Corbelli. I've attended meetings with him, and I know that he is super knowledgeable in Springbrook in the financial program that we use. And it may be beneficial to have someone doing a financial analysis of our all of our books and whatnot that is familiar with what we're using and how we can develop it further to make it more useful for all departments and county board members. That's my only feeling with MWK or whatever you go by there. MWK, they're very, Steve is very familiar with our program and setting up the budgets.
Bill,
Does this have to come before the full county board?
So because we're going to be utilizing the contingency fund for this, the full county board votes on contingency fund allocations according to my review of your documents. So the full county board will vote on this on March 9th. And I'll basically echo Sue's comment. When I look at Ellers, and I will say this about Ellers, I mean, they've done excellent work. I've worked with them working on $30 million pro forma sewer water projects in a vastly growing city. I will also say with Steve Corbelli, he has been involved with his partner with the Springbrook accounting software system, which is online and they can access. I think one of the things that we have to think about, are we at the higher level 10-year financial plan stage, or are we at how do we work with the system we have to get better projections and better reports? I'm not sure Ellers is going to log into Springbrook and help develop systems and reports out of that. So they both are excellent operations, but one I think would be at a higher level when you think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, you're working on, Ellers is going to help with that 10-year projection plan. Steve Corbelli and Mike are going to be working more, would be working more on the base level, which is here's what we have in our systems. How do you figure out what to do with what we have?
Do we have Ellers on the line?
We do not. I had offered them up and they basically just said their proposal would stand as is.
I'm sure if we asked them that they could do that stuff too.
Dick?
Yes. In regards to what Sue said and then what the administrator was speaking to, Ellers has the background and experience in staff to address the bigger picture, you know, whether it's a 5 or 10-year plan the county ends up going with. But a related issue is the day-to-day that you were speaking to there. And that was one of the issues that the city had to address at approximately the same time. It was really right after the first 5-year plan, because you need software to implement all of those things. And so the related discussion is business practices here, which is going to include the online software, records management, to generate those reports. This is certainly an issue the county needs to address in part in relation to this financial management plan. And given the software you use and the experience that you have had with these people that you're working with, when the county gets to the point, which hopefully is in the near future, that says we need to implement the following changes, and yes, it's going to cost something, but if we want these reports and we want to track what we're doing, we're going to have to address that issue too. then that's where working with that firm sounds like they should be on the list of who is contacted to do that work. But this 5-year or 10-year plan that the county develops, it's going to require some changes in business practices, no question whatsoever. And that's going to mean, you know, software capable of supporting that too.
So you're thinking like this would be like a 2-step process, which is get the plan together with Ellers, and then if we need help, if we need guidance and providing the reports and the business practices, we would bring these other guys back in.
There are business practices that the county needs to change.
Yes.
So, you know, it's one thing to go through a budget. It's quite another to follow that budget for both the departments and for staff. So given the practices we have, you know, for example, the 2.4 million in the highway department that isn't there, that says we need to change business practices, you know, in part. And so staff is going to have the necessary software and staffing to be able to support that. And the firm that you're working with sounds like they would be high on the list of who to talk to about implementing those changes in the practices. But the financial plan, that's a separate but related piece.
But they're offering that in their proposal. MWK is. You know, I mean, I don't know.
Well,
As we go forward, Eller should be able to save us enough to have a financial person on permanently. As they go through this and we have a 10-year plan and our auditors have been telling us for how long that we need a financial director and we could have a financial/HR director, they should be able to save us enough money by going through what we've got to get us to the place that we need according to our auditors. Because we can't keep dropping this on departments and on Clark and then asking them to do everything when the auditors keep telling us you need somebody just to do finance. That'll also give us another person that can deal with grants and somebody else to help out with HR.
So,
All right, Laura,
yeah, so Dick, you're at a point where you had a motion and a second to engage Ellers and Associate for a fiscal oversight evaluation and plan.
okay, we have a motion and a second on the table to use Ellers and Associates. We need a roll call vote for this.
I would take a roll call vote from the Finance Committee for this particular motion that would be recommended to the county board.
Okay, Lori?
Mike Berlin. I'm sorry, I did not catch that.
Yes.
Laura Negro,
Yes,
Pat Kinney.
Yes.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Marty Vitek.
Yes.
Okay, we got 4.
Pardon? You call my name?
not unless there's a tie.
We got 4 votes from the Finance Committee on it. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, so
Okay.
motion
Okay.
carried.
Okay. Yeah, I got it. So the vote from the Finance Committee was unanimous?
Yes.
Okay, the Finance Committee has instructed us to go with Ellers and Associates by unanimous decision. Thank you. So are we finished now with the financial consultant?
Thank you, Mike and Steve. Mike and Steve did raise their hands. They just wanted to say something. Do you still want to talk after the vote? I didn't notice that till later.
Sure, why not? Sure. Yeah, and we just want to thank you for your time here and consideration here, but And I don't know how closely you looked at our experience, and just to briefly go over it, you know, I have over 40 years of experience, worked with at least 30 counties in Wisconsin. And I think I listed 6 or 7 where I've done this specific thing in the 1990s and early 2000s. And we were planning on doing a deep dive into the departments. I think there's a lot of issues with your highway department, with human services, just that we can see in the budget process. And I'll tell you, I lived it, did audits. I was in charge of audits for major CPA from Wisconsin for years. And now I'm doing consulting. And Steve, I just want Steve to say a couple of words on his background. We were certainly planning on spending more time, because we think you need the more time. And we believe you need a deep dive into many departments, and the big ones are highway and human services. And we can provide you with references, that's for sure. So.
Yeah, so thank you again for entertaining our proposal. And, you know, we just, as I was sitting here listening to some of the comments, I know that we could assist you with getting to where you want to be. I mean, certainly I have lived it day to day, both as a county finance director and administrator, and as a city finance director treasurer. And I've been there. I mean, when I went to the city of Manitowoc, their unassigned fund balance was $16,000. They were virtually bankrupt. And now they're approaching 6 million of surplus from 2012 to today. And we reduced their debt by 25 million, I believe it was. So, and that did involve a financial plan, which maybe we weren't clear enough in our proposal to outline all those things. But as Mike indicated, our plan was, you know, we would be doing this full time for you. It's not, I mean, we're both retired, but we're both doing this. It's not like we're gonna, you know, do it here and there. We would dedicate our time to make sure that we brought you what you need to, you know, get you on the right track. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the proposal. I'm sure when we get to the point of looking at business practices, you will be our first call. So.
Sounds good. Yeah, please keep us in mind. I mean, we'd love to help you out. I mean, we both have dedicated our lives to helping municipal government out, and we'd like to work with you. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Okay, number 7 on the agenda, cash flow concerns.
Okay, I'm bringing this to the attention for both committees, because I think the executive committee weighed in on one of these decisions, and they're going to need to vote on one part of it. The county receives the bulk of its cash twice per year during December through mid-January, when we traditionally are lower on cash. The county treasurer and myself have concerns that we may have a temporary shortage. This past year, we utilized the capital improvement bank loan and the treasurer's account to pay for bills. Otherwise, we would have been 340 in the hole. This is not best practices, as it only should be utilized for capital items, not operations. On this email, you'll see the balance as of 1/6/21. The other attachment is the balances of 1/31/20. Actually, that should be 20, sorry. You can see the decreases in the treasurer money market account due to transfers in the healthcare fund. When looking at investment reports from January 31st, 21, we need to consider a couple things. Capital improvement fund will be spent on capital projects this year. And expect this year, except for $100,000. We need to pay back the debt levy loan of $1.063 million out of the treasurer's money market, which as of 2/17 was $2.2 million. And we did pay that back last week. We did sign off on that on Thursday. In addition, the highway department will be using around $650,000 from the treasurer account this summer for projects. The county treasurer is worried that the $1 million CD, which we expect to cash in this fall, will not be enough to cover payrolls and bills. We are asking this joint committee to allow staff to utilize the $500,000 from the city of Mellon if needed for cash. In addition, we are asking this committee to direct staff to arrange ahead of time some sort of line of credit if we run into a short-term 4 to 6 week cash shortage. this would be approved by the county board chairperson. And so in your packet, you'll see this is our investment reports. And the main thing that we look at is this treasurer's report right here, or treasurer's account. This is treated like a money market account. And so when Tracy has money in her regular, like let's say general fund, a checking account, when there's money, well, like over $1 million in there, she moves it into the money market to earn a little bit more interest. The other thing that we manage for our backup is we have the city of Mellon money, which they paid us $500,000. And we vote on that, utilization of that, if you remember a year ago. And I think it was a board decision, if not a finance committee decision, which was just to leave it in its own account and then allocate it through the normal budgetary process. Because you might remember there was some issue where there were some comments made about uses for it that became controversial. And then we basically clarified our uses of it, which would be allocated during the budgetary process. With the needs of the county from a cash perspective, we might need to utilize that cash for operations to pay for payroll and bills and everything else. So I may be asking for the flexibility to utilize that money if we need it. And then this is our 12-month CD, which is at $1 million, $1,049,000. There is no prepayment penalty for that, and Tracy has been doing her best to not tap into that CD in order to garner interest. So we get, $40,000, maybe $50,000 a year off that. And so we want to try to keep that in there as much as possible. But our concern is that we're going to have to break into that and maybe the Mellon money if we need it. This was where we, this spreadsheet here, you can see we had the treasurer's balance of $825,000, but buried within there was the $1 million loan that's used for road construction and the debt levy, basically road construction squads and highway equipment. So basically, if we didn't put that money in there, we would have been $300,000 in the hole. But we basically did that in order to maintain that CD and not have to cash in the CD, because we're doing everything we can not to do that. So, and then this is just basically, this is our pooled cash at the end of 2019. And this came from the auditors. And so when this goes back to what we had discussed, what Pat had discussed earlier, which is you have these funds, such as the $2.5 million highway fund, does not sit inside of its own bank account. The money's not there. So when I talk about that fund, it's a fund in theory. And the highway department's gonna be taking $650,000 from that fund this summer. So that's when it becomes real, when we have to remove cash from the general fund to basically pay for things. We have a number of different funds, some of which are in the hole. Health and Human Services has a fund that's in the hole $770,000. And, and that's borrowed again from the general fund. And the general fund has been utilizing money that funds that had positive balances. They go all the way down. You have even a small, like there's like a veteran service fund of $44,000. That's a non-lapsing fund, but it doesn't sit in its own separate passbook. The issue with when you're managing the accounting is if you take all your funds and you move them into separate passbooks, you then have limited yourself in cash management because now you don't have the money, it's sitting somewhere else. So I guess we're looking at this to see a motion, say, allow staff to utilize the $500,000 from the city of Mellon if needed to cover operations. That's the first motion I'd be looking for.
Well, a question for clarification. If the county did get into that, would the county try to repay that at some time, or would it simply be removed and left at
That would be a county board decision. I mean, the decision from the county board was to utilize this money during the normal budgetary process. It's not been set aside or designated for any purpose besides operations.
So I just want to be clear if there's any expectation of returning money in what you're thinking.
If we need to utilize the money, I think we would utilize the money.
So I'll make the motion that the administrator is allowed to utilize funds from the Mellon Fund if necessary, without any expectation of returning those funds later. Just so we're clear on that.
Yep.
Now, is this strictly a finance committee decision?
I think actually the executive committee made the decision on the Mellon designation, if I remember correctly, because they were involved with the negotiations and the signing of the quit claim deed. Did you remember differently, Sue?
I do not remember.
Yeah, yeah. It was my understanding that the executive committee was the one that made the recommendations to the county board regarding the quit claim deed to the city of Mellon, and so I would believe they would be the ones that would basically speak to the uses of that fund after they basically designated to be utilized during the normal budgetary process. We are stepping outside of the normal budgetary process because we want to have the flexibility if we need cash to be able to utilize it.
Richard,
Yes.
where is this money sitting now, this 500,000?
It's sitting in a regular passbook account. So if you look at this investment report, which is part of your packet, you will see right down here account number, and there's your account number 9333846. So it's sitting in its own separate passbook account, bank account. And if we needed it, we would just move it back to the treasurer's general fund if we needed it.
Okay.
Yes, Marty.
Clark, doesn't the county have a line of credit with the bank to cover cash flow?
We do not. So that would be the second thing. We basically have a motion on the floor from Pat right
Except
now.
if it's exec, then Pat can't make the motion.
What?
If it's exec committee, then Pat can't make the motion. Pat's finance.
Good point.
Yeah, Dick, before I make this motion, I just wanted to clearly understood. This motion, if it's passed, will still go to the full county board for approval, correct? Or is it, the reason I have a little bit of a concern is we're gonna do what we have been doing for years, taking money from someplace else to pay something without looking enough at where can we make cuts. And this is, you know, if the referendum goes down, we're in bigger trouble than we are today. But I would be willing to make the same motion that Pat attempted to make as an executive committee member, with the thinking, not in the motion, but the thinking that we're going to try our darndest to put money back into these other accounts, because we keep taking money from highway, we take it from this. We just can't keep doing that. But I would make a motion to go ahead and use part of or all of the $500,000 Mellon money for cash flow concerns as we need it, with the thinking that we're going to attempt to put some money back somewhere.
Now, if I understand this correctly, this is something the executive committee
Yes.
only is going to vote on?
Yes.
So then we need a second from the executive committee. I'll second it.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, Marty seconded.
Yeah.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table.
Right. And then Marty had a question, which I did not answer because I was waiting for a second to enter into debate. We do not have a line of credit currently lined up with the bank. When I came here in the fall of 19, we had there was a $3 million line of credit, which was just basically utilizing for capital expenditures and other items. And in order to, they weren't doing it correctly. The Department of Revenue had a big problem. I think I've talked about this numerous times. I turned that line of credit into an 8-year note in order to have it acceptable for debt levy. And so every year on your debt levy capital budget, you will see a $286,000 payment to pay off that line of credit, which we had been accumulating for a number of years. So this is where we need a financial situation. Or financial evaluation. So we have to pay off that line of credit. We also every year take out a debt levy. And this year we took out a $1 million loan, which we just paid back, short-term loan in order to levy debt onto the citizens to pay for mostly highway and a couple squads and a couple small things. And then, so if you basically approve this would help us in the cash flow operations if we need it. And then the second motion would be basically aligning a line of credit so that if in the emergency we need to pay the bills, we're not going to bounce the checks. And that would be a short-term thing until cash comes in. And when I look at the cash flow, the issue we have is that cash flow gets low from December until about January 15th. And after that, then we pay. So this is what happened with the debt level. We took out the loan in December and we just paid it back last week after we got cash in the bank.
So do you want to act on the first motion first and then?
That's correct. Yep.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table.
Pat has a question.
Ask the administrator, presumably the interest that the Mellon money is earning would be less than the interest charged on a line of credit. That sound fair?
Yes.
Okay. And then if you have a line of credit, is the assumption then that would get paid back as soon as you had money to pay it back?
Yes.
And so as far as dipping into the Mellon money, if you at all could avoid using the Mellon money for a period of time without having to use a line of credit, you would do so.
Yeah, I would basically use the Mellon money before I utilized the line of credit.
But you wouldn't use the Mellon money if you could get by somehow without utilizing it.
That's correct. Yeah. What happens is every week I sign off, I look at all the vouchers, I look at all the bills. Most, it's anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000 a week. And what the treasurer is concerned about is she's going to get into December and she's going to have $500,000 a bill and she's only going to have $400,000 in cash.
So with the motion on the floor, our understanding is that the county will not dip into that Mellon money unless there's just simply no other way around paying the bills for that period of time.
That's correct, because we would dip into the Mellon money before we would cash in the $1 million CD, strictly for the interest which you referenced before. And so I would rather tap into the Mellon money and leave the $1 million in there. But again, part of this cash flow analysis is you need somebody that is smarter than me to do a 36-month cash flow analysis to say, where are our low points going to be in the next 3 years and how are we going to manage cash? And when you hired me, I expressly said, I am not a finance director, and those are the skills that, for whatever reason, you still hired me. But I want to make sure I'm not misrepresenting who I am as your county administrator.
So I got one more question. If the Mellon money would be used first and only if necessary, do you see a scenario where all of that Mellon money would be needed and then a line of credit needed in addition?
That's where, my seat of the pants tells me I don't think so, but I think there's a small chance we might. And the issue is, if we get this financial projections and we get this cash flow analysis, they'll be able to say, yeah, you're never going to get there. But when I talked to the auditors last week, and we were down to this low level, their recommendation is that we should have something in our back pocket in case we get to that point. But the auditors are not stepping in to be management consultants. Their job is to review what we produce and give authenticity to our financial records. They're just saying, we have real concerns about your cash flow. So we're back to the first question. Bill has a question.
Yes, Bill.
This has to go to the county board then.
That would be my recommendation. That way, you know, you're basically making sure everybody, all 21 of you are on board with this.
I would like to see that if it does go to the county board, it does pass, that every time we have a county board meeting, it's brought up that, you know, no, we did not tap into that money. Or we did, we took out so much, but it would be kind of nice to keep updated. So just, you know, 6 months down the road, you don't know what happened. So I would like, you know, I'm in favor of doing that, but I'm just saying, I think that there should be some report to the county board at each meeting that we have, and just saying, no, we didn't use it, or yes, we used so much.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table. Now, this is something that the executive committee alone is going to vote on?
That's correct.
Did you want a roll call?
Yeah, we should probably do a roll call on this just because we're split with the committees here. So Lori, roll call vote, executive committee.
Hang on now. The motion is to allow staff to utilize the $500,000 from the city of Mellon if we need cash to cover operations.
And,
Roll call vote.
and to restore the money, or no?
No, he didn't make that.
Okay.
Dick
We
Pufall,
did.
Yes.
Mike Berlin,
Yes.
Gary Mertig,
Yes.
Bill Metzinger,
Yes.
Marty Vitek.
Yeah.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now, the second motion that you discussed, is that also going to be an executive committee vote alone?
It's finance, isn't it?
Yeah, so the second motion is direct staff to arrange a line of
Yeah.
credit so that if the short-term cash flow is needed, we have an option to draw on a line. And, you know, in the write-up, I suppose your motion could also say that this would only be approved by the county board chairperson, you know, so it's not a Clark Schroeder decision. We're just asking you, the executive committee, to let us do the paperwork ahead of time. And then if this is needed in an emergency in sometime in the future, that the chairperson would be the one that would authorize the utilization for this and the justification for this. And we may get to the point where if we get the financial, if Ellers comes through and says, here's your cash flow projections, we may not need it. But I'm just following through with what the auditors have recommended, which is they believe we might have, there's a chance we might need it.
This is Marty Vitek. I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Marty Vitek. Do we have a second?
Supervisor Murdick will make that second.
Point of clarification, wouldn't this be a finance piece, since finance is the one that deals with the bills and the funding piece? 'Cause
Well, so
exec
executive
is more
committee-
HR.
Yeah, well, executive enters into sign, it's more about, they sign contracts and they basically recommend from a contractual basis. I think finance would manage the finances, but executive would enter into a contractual relationship. Would be, that's my interpretation.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table to approve the. Yes.
Magic.
I'm a little uncomfortable without putting a cap on this. Asking the board chair to sign off is one thing. But boy, a line of credit without a cap on it. I guess I'd like to see some limit on this without it coming back for approval to a committee or the board.
Okay.
You know, I don't want to get into funding something that's, you know, in the many hundreds of thousands or even into the millions without a committee or a board weighing in.
So Sue, I mean, without the projections, I mean, off the top of my head, I was thinking like maybe, you know, $500,000 or $700,000. 500 would be basically do that. We could certainly just add that to the motion. Because this would be a temporary thing. Okay. Friendly amendment? Okay, friendly amendment, $500,000 line of credit.
All right, now what do we do with the original motion?
The original motion was amended to basically read, direct staff to arrange a line of credit so that short-term cash flow needed, we'd have the option to draw on a line of credit up to $500,000 with approval from the county board chairperson. So that's the motion that's on the table.
All right, we have a motion to that effect, and we have a friendly amendment to that effect. You want a roll call vote on this?
Yes.
Lori?
Which committee?
Executive committee, because it's a contract.
Okay, Dick Poofall,
Yes.
Mike Berlin,
Yes.
Gary Mertig,
Yes.
Bill Metzinger,
Yes.
Marty Vitek,
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Number 8 on the agenda, December financials.
Okay, so these are basically your December 2020 statements. The books will be closed in mid-February for 2020. HHS will be collecting state aid payments till March or April. So these are not final. But this is just basically for your information for review, and Sue is here to answer questions if you have any questions concerning these financials or other financial instruments.
Sorry, Nick.
That's all right.
Going back to our business practices here, I don't have a question about the specifics in there, but just to help me think about going forward with business practices. When you look at a sheet like that, do you have an understanding of how each department budget is doing as far as the department staying within the budget or not?
Well, yeah, you can, it'll give percentages at the bottom of each department as to where they're at for that period. So your budget amount is in there, and then your month to date or the period of the, what the report is covering, and then it'll give you, at the very end, it'll give you what percentage is left in the. Is that what you're asking? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is, and I should rephrase my question with one condition, and that is, does this report cover everything that's in a department budget? So when we look at those percents,
Yes.
we know that it's the entire budget, there's nothing missing there.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so then from an administrative standpoint, what happens, and I'm thinking about one department that went 400,000 over budget last year, where I read about it in the paper. Do we have a practice from a business standpoint that when these things start to get to a point of a concern, they'll take it halfway through the year, but they're already 3/4 of the way through the budget? Is there anything that then flags to you or the administration where it says, hey, we got to take a look at this because we're heading in a path that doesn't look like where we want to go?
What was that, the sheriff's department?
Yeah.
It was either last year or the year before that they were over budget significant amount of money. But we have other, I mean, like I know, court has mandated services. We have child placements. We have all sorts of things that we have no control over. And so it,
I mean, the department heads are given we've been doing it quarterly, the reports to them. So, I mean, isn't that part of their responsibility to look at their budget and see that you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
And it's the heart of what I'm asking. So you've got a report where if it covers everything in the budget, it seems like on your end, you can look at it and say, yep, this is where they're at. And then just in terms of practices for the county, the department heads, the administrator, are people looking at that? And then if there's something that rises to a concern in terms of how much has been spent at what point in the year, do you have internal practices to start taking a look at that and addressing that? And I'm going to just say one more thing, and I'm just going to leave that, with you as far as a thought. And then we look at this, and I'm partly trying to understand, am I supposed to understand this well enough to go, hey, wait a minute, this department budget is not on track to where it should be. Now I need to do something versus this just being information, and when things are a little out of whack, that staff and the administrator more internally would be the ones proactive in addressing that. And if there's something that needs to be changed that requires committee or board approval, that you would then be bringing that forward for consideration.
I would think the responsibility for the management of this budget would rest with the administrator and the financial staff. I would not look at a board member to say, you know, here's your victim witness coordinator, and it is, you know, as of December, it was $14,000 over budget, but that was because we didn't get revenue from another place. You know, that goes back, you know, and these are issues we have to deal with.
Hey, Dick?
More questions?
Yeah, just not a question, but that's just what I'm talking about earlier. You know, if we had the monthly report and we, for a moment, had registered deeds up there, and say we saw registered deeds and it said their year budget is $100, and in January they've spent $200, it would be a red flag to everybody. The department heads, the administrator, and the county board, if you could see that. And then you could go and ask the question, why are they over this? And someone would say, well, they're really not, because they're going to get some money over here that'll adjust it or whatever. But that's why the percentage of budget per month or per quarter spent. And I'm sorry, if there's departments that are overspending, we need to know why. If it's a court system and we have no control over a line, fine. But there may be something in the court that we do have control over. And we say in June, you guys are overspending, and I say we, someone says to them, you're overspending on that line item, tell us why and how do we correct it? We can't keep going to the end of the year and saying, well, we overspent the county budget by X amount of dollars. And again, I understand human services, I understand courts, but there are departments that we have more control over, and we say, if you're in line, fine. But if you're overspending something, we need to address it. And even the highway department, if the highway department's overspending their budget, we need to know why and what can we do, if anything, about it. But that's why those financial reports would be really interesting, because you can't say, well, it's the county board's problem, when the county board doesn't understand where we are in a given month or a quarter. And so down the road, I think this will help when we get this financial statements or financial help, because we have no idea what the department's doing. So.
Yeah, so I guess I have a question for Sue. So when you look at some of these budgets here, you know, you're seeing the first part of this packet is expenses. The second part of the packet is revenues. It's one thing to be over budget on expenses. Well, as long as you're over budget on revenue, it doesn't matter. You know, is there a way that we can do a single report that basically just says, here's by department expected, basically revenue and expenses and where that is?
Right. Yeah, that might be it. I think there is a way to do that, but I think it's a reconfiguration of account numbers and whatnot to be able to do that. So,
okay.
When we have time, I have a question too.
So, I mean, I can definitely try to work on something that is easier for you to look at and understand. I mean, because I've worked with these reports so long, I understand it, you know, but I get it that, you know, if you're just looking at them once a month or every couple months, and with the revenues not being tied into the expenses, Clark is working on, and Lori are working on putting the budget together so the revenues go together with the expenses so that we can see on the budget, not on these reports. That's a separate thing that they're working on.
Yeah, so this is what we're talking about with the budgets here, which is basically the previous budget was incomprehensible to me. And so I basically have revamped it. And we're on version number 5 here, but we're still working on this. So we'll be prepared to deal with this budget on a department level. So it's all together. So when you see the courts, you'll see exactly, you know, expenditures and budgets for 21 and then what's expected for 22 and then any change in levy. So it gives the board an idea, are we requesting more levy and why are we requesting more money in which department? So, and that's part of, I think part of our overall fiscal management plan with Ellers is probably not going to get into the level of Springbrook to say, here's how you develop this report, but that may be something that we would engage Steve Corbelli and his partner in to say, how can we produce something that is easily accessible, not only to you as board members, but also to our citizens. For our citizens, they can see what's on here, but it's hard for people to understand, are you doing okay or you're not doing okay?
Laura, you've been so patient. Finally, I'm going to call on you.
Thank you. And this is where I came out with the fact that our committees are the ones that are supposed to be watching their budget piece. And then it comes to finance, because the committees I'm on, public property and law enforcement, the sheriff's department brings us numbers, emergency management brings us numbers, and the courthouse, Mark brings us numbers on that stuff. We watch their budgets. On HHS, we get in our packets these things. It's not that the county board as a whole doesn't have access to the pieces of the budget and how it's going along each quarter. We get those reports in the committees, and everybody should have that information. I'm on the email lists for all the committees. I may not go to all the committees, and I don't get paid for anything if I do pop on somebody's stuff just to understand something. But we get those budget pieces, and that's where we have to pay attention. And then if all else fails, when we get to a board meeting and there is room for committee updates, I think every time somebody has a committee, somebody should be doing, whether you rotate through your committee or whatever, that there should be an update of all of this and a piece where we talk about how our budgets are going within that. If we're doing good, there's not a lot to talk about. If we're starting to see issues, that's when we can bring it up to the county board. I think it's each one of our individual committees' responsibility. Instead of having Sue have to come up with a different report, the committees I'm on, the departments bring us where they are on the budget. Maybe we need to, I have not paid a whole bunch of attention to the other ones, because we run by committees. So we need to do our committee piece too.
Yes, Gary.
Yeah, just two things. One, for a note for Lori, that Mike Berlin's left the meeting, just so.
Yes, Mike Berlin left at 10:58.
Thank you.
Then just a quick the one reason why I'm so adamant about knowing more on the budget, and it isn't only doing it yourself, but that I respect all the department heads, but the departments come to the county board and ask for fee increases all the time, or I shouldn't say all the time, sometimes. And once a year we review things, and then we'd have a better understanding, okay, why does the department either A, need an increase, or maybe the committee says to the department, if you're running a deficit, maybe we need to charge the public more for the services we provide. So that's just part of the whole ballgame too. Maybe at county, when we come up to that point in time and say, we're going to start charging more for registered deeds or for different fees, maybe we need to raise them if the department needs the money. So that's just my statement.
Yeah, well, a couple of things I'm currently working on. One is a unified fee schedule for the county. And so Lori and I have been working on this. We're gathering all the fees for all the different services that the county provides. We're going to put them all on one sheet. And then we basically are going to pass an ordinance that says via a resolution, a county can adopt a new fee schedule whenever they please. So in this case, instead of having it go, because right now you have all these little individual ordinances, these individual fees, and we're putting them together so that, and I'm working with our corporate counsel on this to make sure that you can approve them if you want, whenever you want, via a resolution without having to go through an ordinance or a fee schedule. Another thing we're working on is your ordinances. we're basically trying to tabulate all your ordinances, which are on the website, listed by year. There isn't any codification. It isn't, it's just, frankly, it's a mess. And so, I mean, these are all just things that, things we're working on here. So there isn't any motion on the December. We wanted basically just to, get feedback from the joint committee here. And we will further research how to produce, a joint expense revenue report if we can figure that out.
Any more questions? We need a motion to accept your financial for December.
No motion needed.
Okay. All right, moving right along then. We're zooming along at this meeting today. Number 9, discussion and action on the referendum for the county board.
Okay. As you're well aware, there's on January 12th, the county board voted to have a referendum for the citizens to exceed the general levy limit law by $938,000 for 5 years. Vote will take place on April 6th. Next county board meeting is March 9th. One of the thoughts is that this meeting would be a good place to have a listening session for citizens to weigh in and give their thoughts to the board relating to either uses for new county money or services they can do without if it does not pass. If the referendum does not pass, the county will have to make some decisions regarding how to balance the budget with various mandates and community needs when the levy cannot be increased. It would be prudent for citizens to hear from their elected officials what they're willing to cut that is optional or non-mandated if the referendum does not pass. We are not putting forth the 2022 budget at this time, but given we are running in the red and need to reverse the trend, we need to start putting money, and we need to start putting money back into the general fund. In order to stabilize the cash flow of the county, it is assumed that some cuts will need to be made if the referendum does not pass. In all likelihood, since we are required to fulfill the mandates of the state, we would look at non-mandated services and community contributions to bear the brunt of any shortfalls. This agenda item is to give feedback to the county board chairperson and the administrator as they develop the agenda for the next county board meeting. And when we think about this, originally when we're thinking about having a overall general listening session, in order to have a listening session, like, first week in March, we'd have to gather the county board. It costs $1,000 or $1,100 to gather the county board together to provide a listening session. My recommendation to the chairperson for the county board would be that on the agenda for April 9th, we set aside a listening session for citizens to weigh in if the referendum doesn't pass, what is important to them. And for the county board members to basically also hear from that and also offer what they would be willing to eliminate if the referendum doesn't pass. On the screen, you will see this new budget that we've run across. These are basically non-mandated expenses. And these are, so there's basically $521,000 of community contributions that the state does not make us do. Those would obviously be first and foremost when you have to consider the other operations which we have to fund. And I think it'd be important for the citizens to know what the county board thoughts might be if the referendum doesn't pass.
Dick?
Yes.
Supervisor Murray, I kind of agree with waiting till the referendums pass or fail. If we open the door for a March meeting to have discussions, we don't know which way this is going. And what we're going to find is what's going on in the daily press, where every week we're getting another entity telling us why they can't live without our money. And they're justified, I understand it, but that would be what that meeting in March would be. I would much prefer wait till April, see what happens, and then have the listening session if the referendum goes down, because those same entities have been making their case already, and we would just be replaying it.
Yes, Bill.
If the referendum does pass, then we shouldn't have a problem, because it's supposed to be for 5 years. What if it doesn't pass, we'll know by April 9th or 10th or whatever. So, but, a lot of people might have questions about, what this referendum does. And we should have somebody that we refer if they have a question to, rather than everybody come up with their own, if they come up with, oh yeah, we're gonna cut this or we're gonna cut that. No, I think we should have a place that if someone had concerns that they could call in and get the same answer. Plain and simple, we don't know what we're going to cut, well, okay, it's a possibility we could cut these things, but nothing is definite.
Marty?
Laura has her hand up.
Thank you.
Oh, hi, Laura.
Hi, I just like waving at you. I think it's our job to listen to what the people want, what their priorities are. We should be having surveys in order to know what their priorities are. When we go through this, yep, that list that's there of the stuff that is not mandated, that has to be on the cutting list if we're not going to have the referendum passed, and people should know that. They should also know we have departments that are looking to possibly cut people out of them if that referendum doesn't pass, because the departments are going to have to cut people or services or hours. We may have to go to a shorter week. It's going to be a real huge inconvenience. And I think it's our job to get this out before the referendum. And yeah, we're going to hear a lot of flack, but really that's the basic answer, is that list of stuff that Clark's got up on the board right now. That's the stuff that's not mandated. We can't say we can't say, oh, we'll cut the court system because it costs too much. We can't. It's mandated. We can't cut a bunch of stuff out of Health and Human Services. I mean, there's pieces that can, and believe me, they're looking at it, but we can't just say, oh, cut this much percent. Because like I said, you can cut a position and have it be $20,000, even though the whole pay may be $60,000. So you're only making a $20,000 gain, and then we're kicking $40,000 worth of federal or state money in the butt to make it go away. But we have to tell people, these are the things we're going to have to do. This is the stuff that's going to affect your life. And as for unified answers, that's pretty much the answer, is we're going to have to cut if it doesn't pass. And I think people need to know right away. It may be some of your rec stuff. It may be, we may have to cut our money from BART. I mean, this is the situation we're in. People need to know that. And they also need to know, like what Gary said, that we are still, whether this referendum passes or not, we're still going to go through and start doing efficiencies and processes and looking everything over to find out where this thing got too far ahead of us. It has to be all of it, I think, because it's, in the end, we're on the hook for it because we're the ones sitting in the board seats, and I'm okay with that. But I'm not going to sit back and say, well, we'll see if it passes. I'd rather have people mad at me and yelling if they think there's a service that they use that's going to get cut, because that means that they want the referendum to pass then. We can't help some of the outlying areas with anything, including like the ambulance service stuff, because we don't have the money, because we haven't had a plan for pretty much anything. We've been floating along. Here's where we have to say, rubber meets the road. These are the things. We have to own it, and we have to let them know before that. I really, like I said, I've got this stuff locked in. This is what my answers will be, and I want to hear the stuff from the people. I'm going to have Zoom meetings for my first district, and if any of you guys this all jumps on, I'll have to take their names and get them to you. But I would really like, if we're only going to do one meeting, I would rather have us have that March 9th meeting be a place where people can come on and just give us their piece, There are a bunch of people already contacted me already, and they're really for the referendum passing. So I'm just getting them the information is the same stuff as what we've got right here. I think that's our duty.
Marty?
I think this is a helpful chart because I think most people don't understand what can be covered with capital. You know, to try to make the explanation that the highway department has to have a truck on the road for Highway 13, but as a state responsibility, but on Highway C as a county responsibility. And I don't think that distinction gets made. And people don't know that the limited amount of cuts that can be made in this chart. And when it's presented to the public, I don't really know the time. It's helpful for people to know that.
I mean, if you look at the bottom of the sheet that we're developing here, one of the issues, and like I said, these are just like really rough numbers. The unknowns that we have, if the referendum doesn't pass, we're going to be talking about healthcare increases. Healthcare increases anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000. The county board has given direction that they want to see raises for staff in 2022. That's up to them to decide. They didn't get anything this year. That would be $150,000. We're assuming that we're going to be going back to traveling again next year. And it's our auditor's recommendation that we leave money on the table, that we budget, $200,000, $250,000 to put back into the general fund to start building that back up, because you're never going to be able to do highway projects or those other things that have fund balances unless you actually, leave money in the bank. And so when you look at the differences here between this year's budget and next year's budget, these four items make up $811,000 difference. And if they're not taken care of, well, then you're pretty much right where you're at before, which is, healthcare. I mean, at a certain point, you're going to run out of cash. You have to make decisions on some things because you can't deficit spend when you don't have money in the bank. So I'm basically just looking to help with Dick and I as we develop the March 9th meeting. Should this be, an area where citizens can basically weigh in to say, if the referendum doesn't pass, we want these things to be still funded, and the county board's gonna have to weigh in. I mean, are you going to keep extension office if the referendum doesn't pass? Well, ultimately it'll be done during the budgetary process. You're gonna adopt a budget one way or the other in the fall, but for the citizens to know when they vote on the referendum, what's gonna change. I think it's important for them to know. But that's my opinion. But, this is a time for feedback for Dick to weigh in also.
I think one of the things that we have to be very careful about with going forward with the referendum, if you're going to tell them that your taxes are going to go up X amount of dollars, and then we do a debt levy on top of that, I think we have to tell them how much the taxes are actually going to go up with the two combined. And I don't know how you guys feel, but we raise the tax of 25%, we're going to get lynched.
The referendum question has a maximum allowable debt levy built into the question. So the state basically in their guidance for approval, the Department of Revenue says you have to pick how much debt levy is in there. And so the referendum question has that amount in there.
And what is that going to amount to?
I can't remember that off the top of my head.
I think the total is 10.7%. But that's only for the first year after the referendum, and then after that, the debt levy would have to be approved by the board.
Yeah, so basically your debt levy for the year 2022, basically imposed in 21, collectible in 2022, has a maximum amount in there that we basically put in to the referendum question to address your exact issue. Every year after that, the county board, just like every other year, they vote on the debt levy based on whatever they feel the capital needs are of the county. And the debt levy is going to be a problem because, we're basically, because we don't have money in the general fund to fund the road projects, it's going to be a problem because we're not going to have the cash to do the road projects unless we issue more debt. So in the future, it's going to be a very significant issue.
Or don't you think when we have a couple of people here on the highway committee, don't you think we're to the point where some of those projects are going to have to be put on hold?
In my review of Matt's 2034 capital projects, it is unsustainable given the amount of money the county has. It's unsustainable. It's undoable given the money that the county has to do the projects that the highway committee has on their capital projects improvement plan going to 2034.
That wasn't the question. The question was, can some of those projects be put on hold?
Yes.
I mean, I know what roads are roads. They got to be fixed. They got to be fixed. But boy, the shape that we're in right now, we got to consider stuff like that. Yeah.
When it comes to the referendum about people telling us how much their taxes are going to go up, if somebody asks and says, well, how much are my taxes going to go up, and you give them a figure, what I think is going to happen is, I'm an assessor and stuff, and I think a lot of these people are going to be putting their land in forest crop. So, and they don't pay a tax, they pay a rate. And the township gets part and the county gets part. But we're going to have less valuation on the roll if you lose that. And it's based on what type of program you entered. It's not based on how much taxes you pay. And you can't just say the taxes are going to go up $100 on your house because every house is different. But it's going to affect the wildland and everything else. And I just feel we'll lose a lot of valuation, which will drive the taxes up a lot higher. So the next year, after people enter stuff, they're going to be maybe 10, 15% higher again. And there's going to be less to raise that amount. I just think that needs to be taken into consideration that, because, how much money can you pay on a piece of vacant land? What's the cap? How much are you going to hang on to it?
Marty?
There's also the practical matter of, if a person doesn't have the money, they can't pay their taxes no matter how high you go. You know what I mean? There's that breaking point.
Marty, can you get closer to the mic?
There's a breaking point, and if we get too close to it, I think things will kind of get pretty bad.
As we talk about this stuff, there's not only the cuts part of this budget and our problem that we have to take care of, there's also our revenue. Tonight on Bayfield County's agenda, they have a resolution that will develop forest carbon offset project for their county lands, including the county forest, and participation in the voluntary carbon market under an American Carbon Registry Improved Forest Management Program. What that means is there's businesses that will pay for carbon credits and they pay us because we have trees. And that's what they have on their agenda for tonight. I'm going to be on that meeting because this is something I'd brought up previously as one small piece that might help us have a sustainable income plan for the future. So I'm going to go in and sit there. They have a great, I don't know what research they did and what they'll talk about, but they've got some good information on there They've got a whole piece from a place called Blue Source that talks about how to develop it and what they do and how it works. So if you go on and you pull their agenda, or if you'd like, I could send you a link to the agenda too, because I do have that. But those are also the things that we need to bring up and look and help. Like I said, I try to look for any grants or any income pieces that we may not have had before, and try to bring them to the committees. And I'm sure I drive Mick especially nuts because I send him and his department a bunch of different grants, but we have found a few different things that they might be able to utilize. And I've also sent the court system some too, that they can help with programs that will defer people from using the jail and sitting in through that kind of stuff, if we can route them around it, which saves us cost too, and also is better for our community if people can get better in their life instead of having to use the court system. So I'm working on things like that. If you guys would like, I'll send you that. I'm going to be on it tonight, and I think Lissa's going to be on it from UW Extension too.
Yep, Pat?
Well, first I want to, Bill had made some comments regarding the property taxes. It's interesting you mentioned that. I've got 210 acres in Baker County where I grew up, and I've been looking at that very thing. I've got a link on the tax rate for different categories of land by township. And so I've been looking at that issue. And then Laura, you mentioned the carbon sequestration. I've been following that too, you know, both locally at the state level and nationally. And I think that is going to be a major issue in terms of land use, and it's going to affect property taxes up here. So I think those are things we have to keep in mind. But on the March 9th thing, I guess a couple of thoughts. One of which is the board isn't scheduled to take any action on the budget at March 9th. Normally a listening session is held just prior to taking action. So on the one hand, we wouldn't be taking action in March, but on the other hand, it's really up to the public to decide in April whether they pass the referendum or not. I think an agenda item in the March meeting related to the budget and budget consequences and what the administration would ask the board to consider, and you know the process we would go through. I think something like that where the public could weigh in, just so that they have a better understanding of the consequences one way or the other if this thing passes or doesn't pass. But any decisions would wait until April or later on the part of the board, which I think is fine. But I would agree with Laura. The more information the public has, the more they can understand where the county is at, and they could, you know, if you write that agenda bill so the public can understand what the board is facing and how this may play out one way or the other, then at least they would understand that better ahead of them actually going out voting, which would be before we would take any action on budget setting. I think more information is better.
So you have enough information, Dick?
I have plenty of it up there, yeah.
That's great. Okay, all right.
We have a couple more things on the agenda, Clark. Do you think that we should move that on to the next meeting or stay here longer? We've been here 2.5 hours now. I don't know how long this is going to take, but
I think we should suck it up and plow through it. You want to take a 5-minute break?
No.
All right.
Okay, the next thing then we have, we're not going to take a break. You guys can talk about it. I'll take a break.
Okay,
Hey,
let's take a
what can I
5-minute
say?
break if we need it. Let's take a 5-minute break. Go ahead. If you have to take a break, go ahead. We can take for 5
Do you have a
minutes.
vice chair there to run a meeting too?
Laura, take a break.
I already have. I walk around with a headset on.
Do that.
Whatever, you're the chair of the meeting, you get to decide.
5-minute break.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, number 10 on the agenda, discussion and action, number of court commissioners in Ashland County.
Circuit courts have the ability to have court commissioners to handle less complex cases, thus freeing up judges' time to handle the more complicated cases. Section 757, 68, county board needs to set the number of court commissioners for each circuit court. So in this case, this has never been done in this county. This is something else that county's never done. So we are going to have the county board, and this will be an executive committee if we still have a quorum. Executive committee recommendation to the county board to set county board 3 court commissioners be allowed for the circuit court, with 2 being paid $100 an hour and 1 being paid $20,022 per year. And this is a change you can see on this highlight here. In my investigation in this and talking with our current family court commissioner, who is paid on a salary basis, there was a 90-10 split between family court and mediation. And I had understood that he was no longer doing mediation, but he has taken on other duties because he took on other duties because the family court commissioner ended up doing too much work. And so we are recommending that we basically just roll both those budgets into one. So instead of $18,322, we're recommending $20,022 per year for the family court commissioner and up to 2 court commissioners at $100 an hour on an as-needed basis. And with that, I'll seek a motion.
Do we have a motion? I'll make that motion.
Okay.
I'll second it. Marty Vitek, I'll second it.
Was that Dick that made the motion?
Dick made the motion, Marty seconded.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second on the table.
And this
To
gets,
go with-
this will go to the county board, and then we're just filling in the gaps of things we haven't done.
This save us any money or cost us more,
Excuse me?
or does this save us money by having a third one kind of on call and locked in?
No. In fact, if you look on the bottom here, in 2022, we budgeted $1,500
Yeah.
for county court commissioners, and it looks like it was $12,000 was actually spent on that service. So again, issued by the judge. I don't have any control over that. So this circuit court here has been rated from its caseload to have 1.6 judge caseload, meaning that there's more work here than one judge can do. But we're not quite at the point. We basically have been working with Iron County to see about sharing a judge between those two. So we would have an extra judge instead of working with court commissioners. Either case, we have to basically, the judges are state employees, but the support staff are county responsibility. So the clerk of court staff in all the operations and offices are funded by us. There are counties that, if you have the county I used to work for, they're getting 2 new judges and they are adding on 2 new courtrooms to their county. They don't have a choice to do that. So in this case, having court commissioners is a cost savings operation for us versus having another full-time judge. So that's, but again, we don't have much decision over that. These are separate branches of government.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. I would imagine it's going to be a roll call vote.
Sure.
The money item.
Executive committee roll call vote.
Dick Poofall,
Yes.
Mike Berlin is absent, Gary Mertig,
Yes.
Bill Metzinger,
Yes.
Marty Vitek,
Yeah. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Number 11 on the agenda, discussion and insurance review.
Okay, this is, no motion is needed here, but an immense amount of work has been put in by staff and Laura and Pat. We basically have a health insurance committee made of 2 county board members, 2 department heads, and 2 line staff, plus myself, Sue and Heather. And we've gone through and selected RFPs to, and I would encourage you to read the packet. I'm assuming you all had the opportunity to read the packet, or I can read it for you. I guess, what is your preference on this? I could cut to the chase and just say what the recommendation is, or if you want to go through and hear the detail and listen to 12 pages of material, I can give that to you also.
I'll put a lot of faith in the recommendations of both Laura and Pat.
The recommendation of the Health Insurance Committee is that we stay self-funded. And we basically spend the rest of our spring and summer months working on trying to make that a sustainable operation. We got an RFP back from a pair of brokers that had a number of different insurance companies that would have been able to institute a fully insured plan. The problem with the fully insured plan, even though it limits our risks, we have to end up having to pay for a runout. So if we were to have a fully insured plan starting on July 1st, we would have to come up with an extra $500,000 or more to pay for the runout of the self-funded plan, while at the same time we do that. So from a cash management standpoint, I don't think we have the availability to do that. My other thought is we basically can go through and change our self-funded plan, and we'll work through the executive committee with that in the future to look at changing deductibles, maximum out of pockets, pharmaceutical policies to try to make the plan more sustainable. But the bottom line is as I've gone over with you and many times, you can see the net position of the self-insurance fund is now at $1.7 million in the hole. So we're going to have to pay that back at some point, and I don't have a solution for that besides issuing another $1.7 million in debt. But part of our cash crunch position, half of the problem rests with the self-insurance fund going in debt, and the other half is other funds going in debt. And that's why we have such a poor cash layout position.
Dick, just a question. Being self-funded, do we have a catastrophic plan that in the case where we had a $700,000 draw, don't we have an insurance policy that says, hey, once we reach a certain amount that other policy will cover those large debts?
Yeah, so our self-insurance policy has a $65,000 per member stop loss plus an overall stop loss of 3.8 million. So if we had a whole mess of people that were below 65, they're $64,000, you basically would see a maximum output of 3.8 million. We've been funding it around 3 million to 3.1 million with an expected outlay of 3.2 to 3.3 million. So we've been the issue is we've been underfunding from the expectation. And in addition, there is, we basically have been offering dental in a self-funded operation also. So you can see on the chart here, we've spent $370,000 subsidizing dental insurance for the employees since 2016. The committee, the insurance committee, even though I'm recommending getting rid of dental, there has been pushback from that committee because it is a benefit for the staff. So one of the things we can look at is making that a fully insured plan, Delta Dental, that would be sponsored by the county, but would be less subsidized by the county. That would save us $370,000 over that 5-year period. A couple other things you should be aware of. We had a $1 million claim that we've had, and we had been basically utilizing ourselves as the bank. So we were paying the bills and then getting reimbursed from the reinsurance company. I did switch that in January once I became aware of it, that now we basically don't pay the providers until we get paid by the reinsurance company. And so I'm thinking some of our cash fluctuations will be less severe by not having to pay these large claims and then seeking reimbursement after the fact. So I'm looking for a more stabilized level of healthcare funds with that change. We also did change to not insure retirees who are over the age of 65, and that became effective on February 1st of this year. And so that will change our trajectory for our stop losses. And then, like I said, the dental is something we're going to have to look at. So this is not an action item, but we are asked to basically come back with a recommendation, because if we were going to make a recommendation to go to a fully insured plan, we would have to, have a more than the informal RFP process. We did get back like 4 proposals. We picked one to review, but I think if we were to do that, we would want to have a more formalized process and go out to January 1st, because the crunch time and trying to figure out the cash would be a problem. So this is just an information that we basically have the committee, we've worked on it, we've made some improvements on it. This overall is going to affect the budget also. As you can see, regardless of what goes on, we need to put more money into the self-insurance plan because we are not putting enough money into it, and we've driven up a $1.7 million loss over the last, since 2005, basically, we went back to.
Yes, Marty.
Hi, Dick.
Over the years, then we had this deficit of $1.7 million, and we get reimbursed or somehow financed by the state for the positions and mandated services that we provide. So is it possible that the state isn't paying us, reimbursing us enough money, or how does that come about?
Well, the state doesn't reimburse us for healthcare. The state, as Laura has alluded to, in Health and Human Services, there are a number of different departments that get a certain percentage of their costs reimbursed. So if you check, like downstairs next to my office is child support. They get paid 66% of the cost of providing child support services. The county picks up the other 33%. By chronically underfunding the healthcare fund, we are actually leaving money on the table, because at the end of the year, when we have to put additional money, or during the middle of the year, when we have to put additional money into the fund, that doesn't get reimbursed by the state for the few departments that get reimbursed for their expenses. So it's not a huge amount of money, but by being a little more honest in our budgetary processes and say, we're going to just put more money into it, we basically would bring in a little bit more money. My thinking and the committee's thinking on the self-funded plan is on this spreadsheet here. And so we're looking at, if we look at a 9% increase in the cost of insurance, we would basically be moving from a $3.1 million contribution to a $3.4 million contribution. And that's a $283,000 overall addition to it, of which the county would be $254,000. So about $250,000 we'd have to have from general levy dollars to fund the system a little bit better. That still does not cover your maximum payouts of $3.8 million. So you're still on the risk for that. But the industry standard is not to fund to the maximum stop loss. The industry standard is to fund for a, above your expected stop loss, your expected output, which is around 3.2 to 3.3. And so I'm recommending, and this is our decision, nobody's going to tell us what to do. The committee we have basically said we want to fund it around 3.4 because then we're more confident we're funding the actual amount of money that we're going to spend. Plus, there might be this opportunity that you might be able to, over the next 15 years, pay back that 1.7 million, which is what the healthcare insurance has gone through over the last 15 years. Yes, Bill.
Is there talk about raising the deductible? Or is that?
Yeah, so basically we did a proposal on the self-funded plan to raise the deductible to, I think, from 750 individual, 1750 with a 10% co-insurance, a maximum out-of-pocket of $4,000. We talked about getting a proposed plan, a model plan of $3,000 single, $6,000 for family. Basically, you'd be shifting about $140,000 of cost from the county to the employee. And those are decisions that I think that we would bring back to the executive committee. The decision basically from this committee was just to stick with what we have, but work on modifying it. And so I think so coming forward, the next executive committee meeting will basically be, how do we tweak this self-insurance plan to try to stabilize it so we don't lose or have such risk for losing money. Laura has her hand up.
Yes, Laura.
Yeah, Laura sat with 2 consultants last night that looked at our health insurance plan and told us that we haven't really been getting serviced correctly. We should have had a whole bunch of these, and I talked about tweaking it during our health committee meetings. There are chronic health, and if somebody has a chronic disease, there's ways to manage those costs. But the thing is we don't even know right now which costs are the ones that are driving our costs up. And we should have been getting renewal packets that have this stuff in it. We should have been having these. I'm not happy with the people that we have, because there should have been a more aggressive talk from them that said, your cost in X, Y, and Z, people using in-network or out-of-network, people with chronic health problems, people who use certain prescriptions. There are a whole bunch of ways to drive these costs down. I would ask, since this is an exec committee thing, I'm going to keep digging into this, because from what I can tell, we all should have had access to a bunch of these numbers and known what things were driving these up. But also, I'm going to keep digging into this, because Delta Dental is supposed to be one of the best ones to talk to find the best way of doing the dental insurance. We canceled the dental insurance on everybody. It's going to drive our medical costs up. We're going to bite our own selves in the butt. There's a whole bunch of information. I would actually ask that we could possibly, and I don't know what the people on the health insurance committee that we just had, I don't know what they think about this, but keeping some of those people on the committee and continue to dig this and get some of this information consolidated to bring to exec to have the best information, because this stuff is, like I said, 3 hours is what I spent with 2 consultants last night about how they can, anytime we change these, the place that we work through should be able to map a strategy. We should have a case manager that has been watching our costs and telling us, hey, this is going up. We should do X, Y, and Z. It's not just, hey, we should raise a deductible, and hey, we should cut this stuff. There's a whole bunch of little minutia in between that is slightly overwhelming once you get down to it. But I think we need to dig into this more, and I think the health insurance committee still needs to do it if the people that are on it would be willing, and the exec committee would be willing to allow us to keep digging into it and bring information back, because this is something that we should actually have like a health insurance committee to constantly keep check on this. Because, and actually, we don't have to RFP our program out. We can RFP the people that manage our program out, because I am I don't know what information makes it to Clark or whoever's getting it, but the people that are servicing our plan through benefits or whatever, BPA, we're not getting our money out of it. They should be more aggressive on this. I just would rather see somebody come in and be more aggressive and constantly contacting us about what we can fix on this. So
we have,
as much as it cleared up for everybody.
we, as the insurance company, we get the reports, and basically the county clerk's office and myself have access to them. So we see what every employee does for drugs. We see what doctor they go to. We see how many times they go, what the costs are. We also have a drug management company,
PBM.
And, and so, and I would think that all of these things could be looked at for improvements, because it's like, there's not, how am I supposed to look at, $300,000 worth of healthcare bills and know what I'm looking at? I'm not nearly that smart. And so, yeah, so I think that's one of the things that we'd be evaluating, which is, do we use a different RX company for RX management? And then do we use a different company as a third-party payer to find somebody else? And then also, obviously, we have to pay them also. So these are things we could look at.
It's even to BPA being the plan administrator, because they should have been more aggressive. You shouldn't have to go through these costs. But these two consultants that I was on with for 3 hours last night, there isn't a county board member that they deal with that doesn't have access to that. There's ways they can limit it so we don't see the names and things, but we should all have access to these things, especially on finance, when we're looking at spending out for this, because we're trying to backfill something that should have had tweaks all along. And it shouldn't have had to be initiated from the county board until we went, wait, why is this getting so bad? What did our insurance person say? Because we don't have that information. And you shouldn't have to dig through it all that either, except for the part where it's like, okay, I'll bring that piece of information to the county board. BPA is not doing their job. Whoever our case manager through that insurance company is not doing their job. These two people that have been doing this for 130 and the other 40 years were stunned that it got this bad without them, like whoever is managing it, throwing a fit.
Yes, Pat.
I got a couple of questions for the administrator. When you mentioned that the people over 65 are no longer in the plan, did you mean 65 or over?
Retirees who have retired from the county who are 65 or older are no longer eligible for the county insurance plan.
Okay, because you said over 65 before. I just want to make sure we're including 65, because you just said then. The 65,000 per member, is that, I'm thinking family plan here, is that for any one person in that family, or is that aggregate for that employee and their entire family?
It's per person,
So,
or dependent. Yeah.
So you could have a husband and a wife, and anytime any one of them individually go over 65, then it kicks in, but it's not aggregate.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. The dental, I've pondered that since the last meeting a little bit, and I guess from growing up in a family where we didn't have any insurance growing up, I guess when there were broken bones and stitches, which is the most common thing, we knew that and we dealt with it, and there was no long-term consequences. With the teeth, you don't know what's wrong, and until it hurts. And so the dental I'd like to take another look at, because there really are longer-term consequences, for everybody, from kids through my mom's 84, and she's still paying the price for lack of dental care early in life. And so I think I'd like to look at that. And then the HSA, the health savings account, you've got 1,400 in there right now penciled in. How did you come up with 1,400? And is that the sweet spot, so to speak, for the county in these place?
Well, that was when we were considering going to a fully insured plan.
Yeah.
And that basically was I think that was the minimum amount that you could have for a qualified plan at a high deductible. The 1,400, I think, was a minimum HSA that could be contributed towards that.
So,
But since we're basically sticking with fully insured, you know, if we stick with the health insurance study group, we could, you know, we could tweak our own system. We could look at our own making a high deductible plan by ourselves and emulating the HSA, a health savings account, and or a overlay of a health reimbursement account. That'd be one way we could kind of tweak we could emulate that plan if we wanted to do that ourselves.
if we do emulate that plan, the 1,400 is a number I think we should look at. Because on the one hand, that 1,400, that's what the county would put in, and that's what the employees would draw from first. So on the one hand, if employees said, well, I might go to the doc, they'd have to think about, do I really want to dip into that 1,400? And if they think they really want to and need to, fine. But on the other hand, they might say, you know, I'm going to leave that because I don't feel that bad. So, you know, when they're spending money that's in the HSA, that's money they get to keep and take with them, you know, indefinitely. On the one hand, the more that's there, the more incentive the employee has to not touch it because that's money they get to keep. But the sooner they burn through it and go to what the county's then going to pay, then the less incentive there is to keep it. That's why I asked about the 1,400. I think that's a number we should try to do more research on in terms of an amount that works well for the employer.
Yeah, so it's easier. What Pat's talking about, basically, a health savings account is money that gets put into an employee's account, and they get to keep that even when they leave the county. A health reimbursement account, HRA, is an account which basically is used for healthcare expenses, but if the employee doesn't use it, the county doesn't expend it. The tough part of developing a self-funded plan with a HSA with an overlaying HRA is, unlike a fully insured plan, where you would basically change the plan model and then you would get a premium. So it would be given to you saying, you know, it's like plan, you know, company A says, here's what your plan is if your deductibles are here. In our case, we have to decide if we switch to an HRA, HSA, high deductible plan, we still have to decide what we're going to put into the plan. Okay, because we are the insurance company. We have nobody but ourselves to say, what should we put in the plan? We get an expectation of claims in the fall from the reinsurance company. So every fall we go out, and it's almost after budget period, and we're going to try to do better this year. But to get the $65,000 and the $3.8 million stop losses, we shopped that out to 4 different reinsurance companies, and we had to go to a new one because the old one was too high of a price. And my gut guess is next year, it's even again, because we have this $1 million claim, it's even going to be higher. But the more variables we put in there, the less confidence we have of the exact amount of money that we need to put in there. So yeah, you're right. We could investigate that, but it gets complicated quickly.
So one more question, just going forward, you mentioned the executive committee a couple times in there. What role do you see the current healthcare committee playing, and then the role of the finance committee? Because you got 2 finance committee members on it. Just what's their plan going forward to work through this?
Well, I would think since we've kind of landed, we were charged basically with the healthcare committee was basically charged with evaluating, should we go fully funded or should we stay with self-insurance? We're making a recommendation to say self-insurance. We're not really making a choice to change anything. So I don't really think that needs to rise to a county board level to say we're just going to do the same thing. I would think if you know, Laura's suggestion to basically, if we want to try to keep evaluating these issues, I am fully supportive of keeping the healthcare committee to evaluate changes to come back to the executive committee. And the reason I say executive committee is because they're the personnel committee and traditionally are the ones that have basically decided the benefits for county staff.
So the current healthcare committee, I'm trying to remember, was that considered an ad hoc committee or not?
I don't think it was ever really fully decided. I think the executive committee just said, we want to have a committee to come back with a recommendation.
So I guess I would just ask you to consider whether you want to formalize the current healthcare committee, you know, in terms of was that ad hoc or not, just so, you know, we know where we're at in terms of what we may or may not be involved with going forward. And you can ponder that. And let us
Yeah,
know.
okay. Any other questions? I mean, this is a very complicated issue, but the bottom line was we're not recommending any radical changes.
I have one question. Since we had all these caps, you know, to go to reinsurance up to $65,000 and that sort of thing. How did we end up over the years with $200,000-300,000 annual deficit?
So when you get your expected losses, your expected costs basically all out the door of, you know, 3.2 million. And if you're not putting in that or more, you're just going to be underfunded. You're underfunding it every year from the get-go. Now, you're hoping that it doesn't turn out that way because we've had some years where it's been under the expectation, which is good. We've had other years where it's been higher, which is bad. So, you know, because we are the insurance company, there isn't a premium. I think if I were to think what has happened over the last 15 years, my gut guess is instead of overfunding the plan to leave money in there, you have underfunded the plan for 15 years off and on to basically save money for operations would be my gut guess, because you have a levy limit law. So my gut guess is the decisions were made either purposeful or basically just decide we're just not going to fund it. We're not going to overfund the plan. We're going to put in the bare minimum or even slightly below the bare minimum in order to save money for operations and salaries.
Just a quick one here. There's in the executive committee, if that's where this is going, we'll talk about it, but there's obviously some ways we can raise revenue. There's nothing off the table, regardless of what any committee's done. I appreciate it, but the executive committee is going to have to look at some of these things and say, you either eliminate something or raise revenue, because you can't keep running in deficit. Everything we talk about is deficit. So I think when we get to some future executive committee meeting, we review this stuff, we'll look at it, because here's a simple solution. Dental insurance is not mandatory, but if the employees and the county feels that dental insurance is a huge thing, you shift who's paying for it. You just said there was hundreds of thousands of dollars for dental insurance. So now we have to make a decision. Does the county pay that or does somebody else pay it? Pretty simple.
Marty, my take on looking at the numbers of why the county got behind is health insurance has gone up far faster than inflation in general for a number of years, long time. Is I think what's happened, this is my take on looking at numbers, is that they've looked at past history, you know, the last however many years and said, okay, what does that look like? And they've been underestimating the cost for the coming year each time, and therefore there's a probability, higher probability that they underfunded than overfunded. And so I think when they look at that, you can look back at maybe say 3 years and say, okay, what is this averaging? But then you've got to adjust because healthcare costs have gone up so fast, maybe 10–15% a year. You really need to adjust, you know, if it's a number from 3 years ago, you need to say, okay, if it was 3 million 3 years ago, what if I had 10 or 15% increases in the last 3 years on that? So you compound that based on that, you do that with each of those numbers, and you end up with something higher, you know, but that is an index for healthcare inflation, and you use that for the projection for the coming year. And I don't think that they're doing that, and therefore you have a high probability of underfunding each year, and you're just kind of consistently doing that. And so when you look at, you know, you're looking at 3.4 million this year, I think that's on the lowest end of what you should be looking at. And if we're looking at, you know, the coming year, I would consider the 3.5. And I don't think it'd be that far off, especially because, as you said, we've got this one high claim, and I would agree you're probably going to be, you know, paying more. So I would target on the high side. And then if there is a surplus, put that into, if you can, a dedicated fund and use it towards the next year. But there's no point in underfunding.
Okay, Clark, I'm gonna wrap this up.
Unless
I have
there's
one
no,
more question for Clark.
yeah,
Clark, do you have access to the renewal packets for the past few years for this insurance?
the renewal packet.
Yes, there should have been a renewal packet that comes from the insurance company to us talking about where our stuff got spent and their recommendations.
Yeah, that I have there's like a 100-page document that we sign off for our packet.
Okay. If I could get at least the last 3 years of those or somebody's contact information, that would be best to email for the information that I need to keep researching this.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it's more of a contractual thing. I don't think it goes into depth on data analysis regarding, what happens is on an individual or pharmacological issue. But I will give it to you, and you can see if that's something you're looking for, if you want different information. But we could certainly try to develop, the monthly reports. I could see if they could basically put together, instead of putting the reports as is, they could see about doing the redacted reports also. That would give,
All they have to do is pull the numbers for us and say, here's where your high costs are. Is it people with health problems? Is it people not using a network? There's all these reports can be pulled just as numbers, not as, Sue is the one that went and had this happen. We don't need that information. We just need to know where the bad spots in this are. And there are plenty of ways to work with the program to minimize those things.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. No. I mean, so I would expect that you would see this item come up at future executive committees as we work through the process of tweaking the plan and the benefit plan for the staff that work here.
Do you have an update for us?
I'm glad you asked that, Mr. Football.
I'm not.
Be careful what you ask for.
Exactly.
I've been working, as I said earlier, the federal government, we were watching closely from NACO concerning the $1.9 trillion package that's working through the House this week and then going to the Senate. And there's a couple of sticking points which you're aware of, minimum wage and some other things. But if that passes, there'd be $3.3 million that would be allocated to Ashland County. We're working with our representatives in Washington to say, and the Treasury Department, to be able to say, what would be the allowable uses for that? Okay, they're not going to let us pay health insurance for that, obviously, but it's going to be COVID. There's like 4 main categories, 2 of which are COVID-related expenses. One is lost revenue. And so the question is, if we basically claim lost revenue from maybe even Forrest would help with that. And then basically the 4th one, which is this big broad category we're trying to get into the bill, would be pandemic-related community expenses. So in this case, could we do sub-grants? Could we do, to nonprofits, food shelves, homeless area? Would it be, one county basically is asking, can we do road improvements? Because you have to have roads to respond to a pandemic. If we got this money, one of the uses I would put in is, I'd put this room here, we'd drop in $50,000 and put in a big microphone speaker system with cameras, so we have a professional system, so that we have better production and better hearing for the people that are in the room. Because my anticipation is that probably April or May, we're going to be back in this room with county board instead of being at the church. So we're watching that. Utility aids, as I've talked before, we get a couple $100,000 a year off utility aids. That's basically is for the power plant that doesn't pay property taxes. 80% of that money is kept by the state. We've been working with the governor's office to try to change how that formula is done. That formula has not been updated since the 80s. and there's never been any CPI to it or anything like that. And so we're working on trying to get more money out of that particular issue. The other issue that I think these two committees should be aware of is if an issue comes up, I really want it to go to the chairperson for the county to decide which committee should work on it. And so I may have misstumbled when we had the boat lease. So the boat lease came up, there was a recommendation from the forestry committee to the county board. The county board basically did not take their recommendation, okay, for the $150 lease per year. And so I basically just took that to public property since it's public property, but maybe that was the correct decision, maybe that isn't. But when you look at it, a lot of these decisions could be touching on many different committees. The boat lease could be a financial decision because it's money. It could be involved with public property. It could be a contract or executive committee. It could be forest because they're dealing with that. And obviously, we don't want the inefficiencies of having 5 committees studying the same issue. So if issues come up, so we have the boat lease, we have EMS. We got a request the other day that Health and Human Services review the EMS situation in those towns. And the question is that the right committee to make a recommendation or study this issue to the county board? I don't know, but it could be public property because it's dealing with dispatch. It could be executive because it's a governance issue. So I think we need to go back to the elected officials, because it's hard for me when I get a county board member saying, I want this to be studied. And I don't report to any of you. I report to just one body, 21 people. And I think we need to rest back to the county board chairperson to say, here's an issue that comes up. If you want to, Bill, you want to study this, and Marty, you want to study that. I think instead of me playing the politics, I think we need to have the chairperson say, we're going to assign it to this county board, this county committee. And so I think that may be more help clarification for our county board members. How do I get things I want to study? And, and Dick and I will work on that together, but ultimately you're the politician and I'm just the administrator. I think those are the only updates I had for today. The EMS is a large issue. I've been working a lot on that. It's pages and pages of information, but I would like to, work with Dick to assign it to a committee, and then we'll basically, let that committee learn more about it. And if there is a recommendation, the county board it will be notified and have a recommendation for them.
Well, thank you, Clark. Do you have the next meeting date? Set up.
I do not have another meeting date. I think part of it will be based on
When we need it.
huh?
When we need it.
When we need it, yeah.
Okay.
So and we'll basically split this up again, going back to finance and executive. But I think the issues that I had talked to today, I wanted to speak to both committees so they can both hear it at the same time, so I don't have to do it twice.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
Yes, I'm gonna make today, I make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed who wants to